Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto Summon in World of DxD for breeding with Rias, Ophis and Yasak. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Unwilling Sage. The air in the Hokage's office was stale, thick with the ghosts of paperwork and the lingering scent of old ink. Outside, Konoha was a riot of life and color, a village reborn from ashes, vibrant and loud. But within these four walls, a silence had taken root that Naruto Uzumaki found more deafening than the roar of any tailed beast bomb. Peace. They had fought for it, bled for it, died for it. He had achieved his dream. He was the seventh Hokage, the strongest shinobi in history, a hero revered by all. And he was suffocating. His fingers, calloused and scarred from 1,000 battles, traced the rim of a cold teacup. The face that stared back at him from the polished surface of his desk was not the one he remembered. The boyish grin was gone, replaced by a thin, hard line. The cerulean eyes, once brimming with mischief and unwavering determination, now held a deep, profound weariness. He was a god in a world that no longer needed one. Every challenge was a political squabble, every threat a diplomatic incident. The raw, visceral clarity of battle had been replaced by the slow, grinding erosion of bureaucracy. He pushed back from the desk, the chair groaning in protest. He walked to the large window overlooking the village, his gaze sweeping over the monument hewn into the mountainside. His face was up there now, carved in stone, a permanent fixture. A monument to a man who felt like a relic. A deep, primal part of him, the part that had thrived on the edge of a kunai, screamed for a real fight, for a purpose that didn't involve trade disputes or budget approvals. He closed his eyes, letting his senses expand. He could feel the thrum of life in the village, the chakra of every man, woman, and child. He could feel the slumbering power of Kurama within him, a vast and patient ocean of energy. And beyond that, beyond the veil of his world, he sometimes felt nothing. An emptiness, a void that called to the restless storm inside him. Be careful what you wish for. A gravelly voice rumbled in his mind. Kurama's presence was a familiar comfort, the one constant in his life. Just bored, old friend, Naruto sent back, a flicker of a smile touching his lips. Remember when our biggest problem was figuring out how to beat a guy who could turn into sand? I remember a brat who couldn't even form a proper Rasengan, the fox grumbled, but there was an undercurrent of affection in his tone. Those were simpler times. Naruto's smile faded. Simple. Nothing was simple anymore. He was about to turn back to the mountain of scrolls when the world tilted. It wasn't a tremor or a jutsu. The very fabric of reality seemed to groan, to stretch thin around him. The air crackled, not with lightning, but with an energy that was utterly alien. It was cloying and rich, tasting of ambition and shadow. Instincts honed by the fourth great ninja war screamed to life. He didn't hesitate. In a flash of gold, he was cloaked in the Six Paths Sage mode, truth-seeking orbs humming into existence behind him. The air in his office warped, a swirling vortex of crimson and black appearing in the center of the room. It was a crude, brutal tear in space, unlike any jutsu he had ever witnessed. It wasn't a teleportation technique, it was a violent abduction. Hands, ethereal and crimson, shot out from the vortex, chains of pure, demonic energy lashing towards him. They were fast, impossibly so, but to Naruto, they were moving through molasses. With a flick of his wrist, a chakra rod shot from his palm, intercepting the first chain with a deafening clang. He sidestepped the second, his fingers brushing against its surface. The energy was vile, but it was also fragile, pathetic. More chains erupted, a torrent of them. Naruto didn't move to dodge. He simply released a pulse of his own chakra. It wasn't an attack, just a statement. A wave of pure, golden power, impossibly dense and overwhelming, radiated from him. The chains dissolved into motes of red light before they could even get close. The vortex faltered, the raw power of the Sage of Six Paths shredding the foreign energy that fueled it. What is this, Naruto? Kurama's voice was a low growl, laced with a predatory curiosity. I don't know, Naruto replied, his eyes narrowed on the swirling portal. But it's desperate. And it's a mistake. He could have destroyed it. A single Biju bomb would have collapsed the anomaly and atomized whatever was on the other side. But that wasn't his way. And more than that, he was intrigued. For the first time in years, he felt the familiar thrill of the unknown, the spark of a true challenge. He let the vortex stabilize. He saw fleeting images within its depths. A chamber of ornate stone, figures cloaked in shadow, and a girl with hair the color of blood, her face a mask of strained concentration. They were pulling him. They wanted him for something. With a final, decisive thought, Naruto Uzumaki, the seventh Hokage, stepped into the void. He was not taken. He went willingly. The transition was jarring, a sensation of being turned inside out and reassembled molecule by molecule. When reality snapped back into focus, Naruto stood in a vast, circular chamber. The air was heavy with the same demonic energy from the portal, but 100 times more concentrated. The walls were carved with intricate, glowing runes that pulsed with a malevolent red light. Before him stood a gathering of beings who were distinctly not human. A tall, handsome man with crimson hair and an aristocratic bearing stood at the forefront, his face a mixture of awe and terror. Beside him, the girl from his vision, Rias, was on her knees, panting, sweat beading on her brow. She was the anchor for the ritual, and it had clearly taken its toll. Several other figures, her peerage, he would later learn, were scattered around her, looking equally stunned. But it was the man who stood behind them all that drew Naruto's attention. He was older, with a stern, powerful visage and the same crimson hair. His presence was immense, a towering inferno of demonic power that dwarfed the others. This was a leader, a king, yet, even his power felt contained, limited. No one spoke. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crackle of Naruto's golden chakra cloak, which burned with the intensity of a miniature sun in the dimly lit chamber. He didn't speak either. He observed. He analyzed. His senses, magnified by sage mode, mapped the room in an instant. He noted the power levels of every individual, their emotional states, fear, shock, arrogance, desperation, and the intricate web of energy that made up the summoning circle he now stood in. It was a cage, a sophisticated one, but a cage nonetheless. It worked, the younger crimson-haired man breathed, his voice trembling slightly. He took a half-step forward. Behold, Lord Baal, we have done it. We have summoned a being of immense power. The older man, Baal, did not look impressed. His eyes were fixed on Naruto, a calculating glint within them. So it would seem, Seersex. But what is it? Naruto's head tilted slightly, his expression unreadable. Rias Gemery finally found her voice. She pushed herself to her feet, her crimson hair fanning out behind her. Despite her exhaustion, she projected an air of authority. I am Rias Gremory. You have been summoned to the underworld by the House of Gremory, with the authority of the great King Baal. She gestured to the imposing man behind her. We have a proposition for you. Naruto remained silent, his golden aura flaring slightly, causing the very stones of the chamber to hum. His silence was more unnerving than any threat. It was the silence of a predator assessing its prey. We face a crisis, Rias continued, mistaking his silence for confusion. Quote, the war with the fallen angels and the subsequent civil war, has decimated our population. The bloodlines of the 72 pillars are fading. To ensure the survival of our race, we require new genetic material. A powerful outworlder to revitalize our lineage. She took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping over him. You are to be the progenitor. You will breed with the strongest of our women, starting with me. Your power will usher in a new generation of devils and secure our future. The chamber fell silent once more. The arrogance in her tone was palpable. They hadn't summoned an ally, He thought they had ordered a stud animal. A low chuckle escaped Naruto's lips. It started soft, almost a whisper, but it grew, echoing off the stone walls until it was a full-throated laugh. It was not a laugh of mirth. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated disbelief and scorn. The golden aura around him surged, and the temperature in the room plummeted. The demonic runes on the walls flickered and died. Their power snuffed out like candles in a hurricane. Breed? He asked, his voice calm, yet carrying an edge that made the devils flinch. You ripped me from my home, from my world, for a breeding program. His eyes, glowing with power, settled on rias. You speak of power, girl. You, who are so weak you can barely stand after casting a single summoning spell. You, who stand in a room full of beings whose combined strength wouldn't even be a mild inconvenience to me. You dare to speak to me of propositions. Sirzek's eyes widened. How dare you show respect to my sister, the heiress of the Grimoire clan? He unleashed a wave of his power of destruction, a crimson-black aura of disintegration magic that could erase matter from existence. The wave of energy rolled towards Naruto. He didn't even move. He simply held up a hand, and one of his truth-seeking orbs zipped forward, expanding into a small shield. The power of destruction, the ultimate technique of the Bale clan, hit the shield and vanished. Not blocked, not deflected, it was simply unmade, annihilated on a conceptual level by a power that was infinitely superior. A collective gasp filled the chamber. Sirzek stared, his mouth agape. Bale's stoic facade finally cracked, his eyes wide with shock and a dawning horror. They hadn't just summoned a powerful being. They had summoned something beyond their comprehension. Respect, Naruto said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, is earned, not demanded. He took a step forward, and the summoning circle that was meant to contain him shattered into dust. The intricate runes dissolving under the sheer pressure of his presence. He was no longer a summon. He was an intruder who held all the cards. You brought me here, he continued, his gaze sweeping over all of them. So you will answer my questions. Where am I? Who are you? And what is this crisis that would drive you to such a pathetic and insulting course of action? Before anyone could answer, two new presences made themselves known. The first was subtle, a distortion in the shadows at the edge of the chamber. A small girl with dark hair and deadened eyes materialized from nothingness. She wore a gothic Lolita dress, and her presence was a void, a chilling emptiness that seemed to absorb light and sound. The Ouroboros dragon, Ophis, the infinite dragon god. She said nothing, her gaze fixed on Naruto with an unblinking, unnerving curiosity. The devils tensed, their fear of Naruto momentarily eclipsed by the arrival of one of the two most powerful beings in their world. The second arrival was far more dramatic. The air shimmered, and a golden portal, swirling with delicate fox fire, opened near the center of the room. A woman of breathtaking beauty stepped through. She had 9 flowing golden tails, and gentle fox ears atop her head of blonde hair. She wore an elegant kimono, and her aura was a potent mix of sacred power and raw, untamed nature. This was Yasaka, the leader of the yokai of Kyoto. Her expression, however, was not one of aggression, but of weary resignation. Behind her, several stern-looking yokai warriors emerged, their hands on their weapons. Lord Bale, Yasaka said, her voice like the chiming of bells, though it was laced with steel. You asked for my presence. I am here, but I see your primary guest has already arrived. Her amber eyes flicked towards Naruto, and for a moment, a flicker of surprise crossed her features. She sensed not a demon, but something else. Something ancient and powerful, reminiscent of the divine energies of her own home. Bale scowled, his plans rapidly spiraling out of his control. Yasaka, Ophis, this is a private matter of the devil race. It ceased to be private the moment you tore a hole in reality and one a being whose power makes my own feel like a flickering candle, Ophis stated, her voice flat and emotionless, yet it carried an authority that no one dared to challenge. I am interested in him. Yasaka's gaze lingered on Naruto. A flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. My people were strongly encouraged to participate in this alliance. We were told our contribution was necessary for the survival of us all. It seems the true nature of this alliance was to provide a harem for your summoned champion. Her tone was sharp, a clear condemnation of the devil's methods. She looked at Naruto, a silent message passing between them. I am a pawn here, just as you were meant to be. Naruto understood. He saw the political cage she was in, the same kind of gilded cage he had been living in himself. He gave her a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. He then turned his full attention back to Bale. You are the one in charge here, old man. Talk, now. You have 10 seconds before I decide to find my own way home. And I guarantee, you won't like the door I make. To punctuate his statement, he allowed a fraction of Kurama's chakra to leak out. It wasn't the golden cloak of the sage. It was raw, demonic chakra. Blood red and filled with an ancient, untamable rage. It was an energy the devils understood intimately, yet this was on a scale they couldn't fathom. It was the primordial essence of a tailed beast. A living disaster. The devils, even Baal, stumbled back, gasping as the malevolent pressure washed over them. Yasaka and her yokai tensed, recognizing the aura of a being on par with their greatest legends. Only Ophis remained unmoved, her eyes widening slightly, her interest deepening. Baal, for the first time in centuries, felt a sliver of genuine fear. He looked at the being before him, a being who could wield both a divine, sun-like power and a demonic, hate-filled energy with equal mastery. He looked at the impassive dragon god and the now hostile yokai leader. His grand plan to secure the future of the devil race had just backfired in the most spectacular way possible. He had summoned not a savior, but a reckoning. Very well, Baal said, his voice strained. There is an ancient force. A primordial entity from the dawn of creation. Its seals are weakening. The Chaos Brigade is merely a symptom of its reawakening. We are not strong enough to face it alone. We sought a power that could. Naruto's expression didn't change, but his mind was racing. An ancient, awakening evil. It was a story he knew all too well. Kagaya. He felt the familiar weight of a world-ending threat settle on his shoulders. But this time, it wasn't his world. It wasn't his responsibility. Or was it? He had been brought here. He was involved now, whether he liked it or not. He let the red chakra recede. The oppressive pressure vanishing as quickly as it had come. The golden aura of his sage mode remained, calm and steady. Fine, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the tense silence. I will hear you out. I will assess this threat you speak of. And I will decide my own course of action. But let me make one thing perfectly, undeniably clear. His gaze moved from Baal to Sirzex, then to Rias. And finally lingered for a moment on Yasaka and Ophis. I am not your weapon. I am not your savior. And I am certainly not your breeder. My power is my own. My will is my own. You will treat me as an equal. Or you will be treated as an obstacle. And I remove obstacles. Permanently. He turned and began to walk towards the exit of the chamber, his steps silent and sure. The assembled devils, some of the most powerful beings in their world, instinctively parted for him, none daring to block his path. As he reached the massive doors, he paused, looking back over his shoulder at Rias Grimori. And one more thing. You owe me a new desk. The one you destroyed had a lot of sentimental value. With that, he pushed the doors open and stepped out into the unfamiliar architecture of the underworld. Leaving behind a chamber filled with shattered plans, terrified devils, and two very intrigued female leaders who saw in him not a tool for breeding, but a force that could change the very balance of their world. The game had changed before it had even begun, and the new player was making up his own rules. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Crimson Cage and the Infinite Void. The heavy stone doors of the summoning chamber closed behind Naruto, the sound echoing with a grim finality. The air that greeted him was cool and carried the scent of damp earth and something else, a faint, metallic tang. Like unshed blood and ancient magic. He was in a long, vaulted hallway, lit by glowing crystals embedded in the ceiling that cast everything in a soft, crimson light. The architecture was severe and imposing. All sharp angles and dark, polished stone that seemed to drink the light. It was a place built for power, not for comfort. A woman in a French maid's uniform waited for him. She had long, silver hair braided down her back and an expression of serene neutrality. Her power, however, was anything but neutral. It was a calm, deep ocean, meticulously controlled, and it dwarfed that of the Grimori girl and her entourage. This was a warrior, a highly skilled one, wearing the disguise of a servant. Uzumaki-sama, she said, her voice smooth and devoid of any discernible emotion. I am Graphia Lucifuge. I have been instructed by my husband, Sirzex Lucifer, to escort you to your quarters. She gave a slight, perfect bow. Naruto simply nodded, his sage mode still active, his senses taking in every detail. He walked beside her, his silence a stark contrast to her formal politeness. He didn't need to speak. He was learning. He could feel the thrum of demonic energy that saturated this entire realm. a constant background hum against which the individual signatures of its inhabitants stood out like sparks in the dark. He could feel the oppressive weight of the sky above, even through layers of solid rock. This place was fundamentally different from his own world, its natural energy twisted and wrong. "You seem unperturbed," Graphia commented, her gaze remaining fixed straight ahead. It was a casual probe, a fisherman casting a line. "Should I be?" Naruto replied, his tone equally casual. "Most beings brought here against their will are either terrified or enraged. You are merely observant." Quote, "Rage is a tool, you don't use it until you need to. And I have nothing to be afraid of here," he said, the statement a simple, undeniable fact. Graphia's placid mask didn't slip, but Naruto sensed a flicker of something in her aura, respect, perhaps, or maybe just heightened caution. They passed several guards clad in ornate, black armor. They stood ramrod straight as Naruto passed, but he could feel their fear, a scent as potent as the metallic air. It wasn't just fear of his power, it was the primal fear of a prey animal in the presence of an apex predator whose intentions were unknown. They arrived at a set of large, ornate doors. Graphia pushed them open to reveal a suite of rooms that was breathtaking in its opulence. A massive bed with crimson sheets, a sitting area with plush furniture, and a vast balcony that overlooked a sprawling city under a perpetually twilight sky. The city was a breathtaking vista of Gothic spires and impossibly tall towers, all bathed in the same crimson glow as the palace. "Refreshments will be brought to you shortly. A formal dinner will be held in your honor this evening," Graphia stated. "Is there anything you require?" "My freedom," Naruto said, not looking at her, his eyes fixed on the alien cityscape. "That, I am afraid, is not something I can provide." "I know," Naruto said. He turned to face her, the golden cloak of his sage mode finally receding, leaving him in his familiar orange and black attire. The sudden absence of his overwhelming aura was almost as jarring as its presence. "Tell your U.S. band and his father-in-law that I will attend their dinner. But tell them this is not a negotiation. It's a debriefing. They will tell me everything I want to know. And if I don't like their answers," he let the sentence hang in the air. A threat more potent for being unspoken. Graphia held his gaze for a moment, then gave another slight bow. "Your message will be delivered." She turned and left, the doors closing softly behind her. Alone, Naruto walked out onto the balcony. The air was cool against his skin. He leaned against the stone balustrade, the sheer scale of the city laid out before him. It was a cage, no matter how gilded. A deep sigh escaped him. He missed the smell of Konoha's forests after a rain. He missed the raucous laughter from Ichiraku ramen. He missed the weight of the Hokage hat. A weight he had only just begun to realize he hadn't truly hated. He was a long way from home. A heavy burden, is it not? The voice was soft, melodic, and came from his right. He hadn't sensed her approach, but he had felt her presence lingering nearby since he'd arrived. Yasaka stood a few feet away, her 9 golden tails swaying gently in the slight breeze. She had dismissed her guards. She was not here as a leader demanding an audience, but as something else. "The burden of leadership," Naruto replied, his gaze still on the city. "Or the burden of being a pawn in someone else's game." Yasaka moved to stand beside him at the railing. "Perhaps they are one and the same. To lead is to be a willing pawn for your people's future." She looked at him, her amber eyes holding a deep, ancient wisdom. "The devils were clumsy. Their desperation made them foolish. For that, I offer an apology, though I was not involved in their decision." "Why are you here, Yasaka?" Naruto asked, turning to face her. "You could have just left after that disaster in the summoning room." "My people, the Ukai of Kyoto, are pragmatic," she explained, her voice low. "We were pressured into this alliance. The threat Lord Baal spoke of is real. We have felt its stirrings. Minor gods have gone mad, ancient spirits have vanished. We agreed to lend our support, but I did not agree to the methods I witnessed today." Naruto studied her. He saw the truth in her eyes. She was trapped, just as he was. Forced to play a game with devils who held most of the cards. "You thought I was going to be another chain they could use to bind you." "I did," she admitted. "I saw them summon a weapon they believed they could control. Instead, they seemed to have summoned a typhoon into a teacup. A small, Wry smile touched her lips. I must confess, it was satisfying to watch. Naruto chuckled, a genuine sound of amusement. They could have just asked. Devils do not ask, Yasaka said, her smile fading. They take. They bargain. They bind. It is their nature. Be wary of them, Naruto Uzumaki. Their words are wrapped in contracts and their gifts are laden with hooks. I appreciate the warning, he said. He could feel a strange sort of kinship with this fox spirit. Both were leaders, both were powerful, and both were now caught in the same web. He noticed the faint shimmering in the air at the edges of the balcony. You can tell your guards to stand down. They're making me nervous, and you don't want me to be nervous. Yasaka's eyes widened slightly in surprise. She had not thought her elite guard could be detected. She gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, and the shimmering ceased. Your senses are as formidable as your power. Power is useless if you're blind, Naruto replied simply. You are strong. The new voice was flat, emotionless, and came from directly behind them. Yasaka spun around, her tails bristling, a golden aura of Yujutsu flaring to life. Naruto didn't flinch. He had sensed this presence the moment it arrived, a perfect void that had simply appeared. Ophis, the infinite dragon god, was sitting on the stone balustrade as if she had been there all along. She was idly swinging her legs, her deadened eyes fixed on Naruto. The little dragon god, Yasaka breathed, her stance defensive. What do you want here? Ophis ignored her completely. Her attention was solely on Naruto. You are stronger than Great Red. Your power is quiet, but it is vast. Deeper than his. I felt it. Naruto raised an eyebrow. He had no idea who Great Red was, but the name implied something significant. Okay, and I want to defeat Great Red and return to my home, the dimensional gap. It is quiet there. I want the silence again. You will help me, she stated. It was not a request. It was a declaration of fact. This was the second time in a day that a powerful female being had declared what he was going to do. The novelty was wearing thin. Sorry, but I've got my own problems, Naruto said, turning back to look at the city. I'm a little busy trying to figure out how to get home. Once that's done, maybe I'll have time to help you beat up your rival. Yasaka stared, stunned by his casual dismissal of the Ouroboros dragon. People didn't just talk to Ophis like that. They begged, they groveled, or they fought and died. Ophis, however, merely tilted her head. Her expression didn't change, but Naruto sensed a flicker of genuine curiosity from her void-like aura. Home, she repeated, the word sounding alien on her tongue. You are like me. You are not where you belong. Interesting. She looked at him for a long moment. Very well. Figure out how to get home. Then, you will help me. And as suddenly as she appeared, she was gone. Not teleported. She was simply no longer there. Yasaka let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. You have a unique talent for attracting the attention of complicated women, Naruto Uzumaki. You have no idea, Naruto muttered, thinking of a certain pink-haired kunoichi and a shy Hyuga heiress. The dinner was every bit as tense as Naruto expected. He was seated at a long, polished table in a grand dining hall. Lord Bale sat at the head, with Sirzex on his right and a stern-looking woman, Lady Grimori, he presumed, on his left. Rias was seated opposite Naruto, her peerage standing behind her like statues. Graphia stood behind Sirzex, her presence as unobtrusive and as dangerous as a hidden blade. The food was exotic and delicious, but no one seemed to be enjoying it. Bale and Sirzex were attempting to re-establish their authority, speaking of the great honor they had bestowed upon him and the glorious future that awaited him as the savior of the devil race. Your cooperation will ensure the stability of the underworld for generations to come, Bale was saying, his tone leaving no room for argument. Your role, while unconventional, is of the utmost importance. My role, Naruto said, setting down his fork, was to be a prize stallion, put out to stud. Let's not dress it up in pretty words, old man. You tried to enslave me. The only reason we're having this conversation in your palace is still standing is because I'm showing restraint. Sirzex leaned forward, his friendly facade gone, replaced by the cold authority of a Satan. We understand our initial approach was indelicate. But the threat we face is unprecedented. Trihexa, the apocalyptic beast. Its seals weaken with every conflict, every war. The Chaos Brigade, led by that fool Rizvam, seeks to unleash it. If they succeed, this world, and every other, including your own, will be consumed. Rias then spoke, her voice softer, more earnest than before. Please, Uzumaki-san, forget about us. Think of the innocent people who will die. You're a hero, aren't you? A hero saves people. We're asking you to save everyone. It was a good speech. Well rehearsed. It might have even worked on the old Naruto. But the man who sat before them was not a naive boy. He was a leader who had sent men to their deaths for the greater good. He was a warrior who understood that ideals were the first casualty of war. You want a hero, but you tried to put him in a cage first. Naruto said, his voice dangerously quiet. A hero chooses his own battles. You tried to take that choice away from me. Everything you say now is tainted by that first act. He picked up his fork again. My duty is to my home, which you took me from. There is no honor in what you did. So, we're done with the speeches and the appeals to a sense of duty I don't have to your world. We're going to talk about facts. And you're going to give me a way home. The arrogance was too much for some. A young devil with blonde hair, standing behind Rias, stepped forward. He had a mocking sneer on his face. You dare speak with such insolence to the great King Baal and Lord Lucifer. You are nothing but a summoned beast, an uppity familiar who should be grateful for tea. He attention of a high-class devil like my cousin Rias. Naruto didn't even look at him. His eyes remained on his plate. But the atmosphere in the room changed. It wasn't a flare of chakra or a surge of power. It was something far more terrifying. A pressure descended upon the room, a suffocating wave of pure, undiluted killing intent. It was the condensed essence of 1,000 life or death battles, the chilling promise of a violent, merciless death. The air grew thick and heavy, pressing down on them all. The candles around the room sputtered and died, plunging the hull into a gloom broken only by the ambient light from outside. The young devil who had spoken choked, his hands flying to his throat as if caught in an invisible grip. He collapsed to his knees, his eyes wide with a terror. Oh, profound, it seemed to have stolen his soul. The guards lining the walls froze, their hands on their swords, but their bodies refused to obey their commands. Lord Baal and Sirzex shot to their feet. Their own crimson auras flaring to life to resist the pressure, but even they were pale, sweat beading on their brows. This wasn't just power. This was the spiritual weight of a true killer, of eater. And of a war that made their own conflicts look like children's squabbles. They had summoned a warrior king, a being for whom death was an old and familiar friend. As quickly as it came, the pressure vanished. The young devil gasped, collapsing onto the floor, sobbing. Naruto calmly speared a piece of strange, purple meat with his fork and took a bite. He chewed thoughtfully, then swallowed. He looked up at Baal and Sirzex, who were still standing, their auras blazing. As I was saying, he said, his voice unchanged, we need to establish some new ground rules. Later that night, the silence of his opulent suite was a stark contrast to the turmoil in his mind. The dinner had ended with a new, grudging respect from the devils. They had agreed to provide him with all the information he required about their world, their enemies. And, most importantly, the dimensional magic that had brought him here. They understood now. He was not a piece on the board. He was a new player, and they didn't know the rules of his game. But for Naruto, the victory was hollow. Information was not freedom. He stood in the center of the room, his eyes closed. He drew his hands together, forming a familiar seal. He focused, reaching deep within himself, past Kurama's power, past the sage energy, to the primal connection he had with his own world. The link to Mount Myoboku. The summoning contract that was as much a part of his soul as his own name. Reverse summoning jutsu, he whispered. A puff of smoke erupted at his feet. But it was small, weak. The intricate seals of the jutsu formula appeared on the floor, but they were faint. Flickering like a dying light. They held for a second, then dissolved into nothing. He tried again, and again. The result was the same. The connection was there, a faint, impossibly distant thread. But it wasn't strong enough. The dimensional barrier between this world and his own was too thick, the fundamental laws of space-time too different. He was cut off. He opened his eyes and stared at his hands. The hands that had reshaped a world, that had brought peace, that had wielded the power of a god. And they were useless. He walked to the balcony and looked out at the crimson sky. At the alien city that was his prison. The calm, decisive control he had maintained since his arrival finally cracked, and for the first time, a flicker of true, cold fury ignited in his cerulean eyes. They had not just summoned him. They had trapped him. He was a god in a cage. And he would tear this world apart, stone by stone, to find the one who held the key. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Price of Knowledge and the Scent of a Lie. The Grimoire family's library was a monument to hubris. Vast shelves, carved from a dark, petrified wood, stretched up into a domed ceiling paw. Inted with constellations Naruto didn't recognize. The air was thick with the scent of aging paper and demonic energy, a combination he found vaguely unpleasant. It was a room designed to intimidate, to showcase generations of accumulated knowledge and power. Naruto was not intimidated. He sat in a high-backed chair, a cup of untouched tea on the table beside him. Across from him, Rias Grimoire sat stiffly, a stack of ancient-looking tomes beside her. Lord Bale and Searsex stood near a cold fireplace, pretending to be casual observers, but Naruto could feel their intense scrutiny. This was his debriefing, and they had chosen Rias to be his instructor, a move he correctly interpreted as both a slight and a test. Our world, Rias began, her voice a carefully modulated blend of academic lecture and aristocratic command, is governed by three primary factions: the devils, the angels of heaven, and the fallen angels of the Grimoire. We have been in a delicate state of truce since the last Great War. Naruto let her speak for several minutes, his eyes closed, his fingers steepled in front of him. He listened as she detailed the hierarchy of the underworld, the Satans, the 72 pillars, the complex web of alliances and rivalries. It was a political landscape not unlike the one he had navigated as Hokage, just with more brimstone and less paperwork. When she paused for breath, he opened his eyes. You use the term, magic. Define it. Rias blinked, taken aback by the abrupt question. It is the manipulation of demonic power, the energy that flows through all devils, to impose one's will upon reality. So it's like chakra, Naruto said, more a statement than a question. Searsex interjected smoothly. We are aware of your world's chakra. Our research before the summoning was extensive. But your energy is different. It is a blend of spiritual and physical energy. Ours is purely demonic. No, Naruto said, his voice flat. The entire room focused on him. It's not. Energy is energy. You just have a different, less efficient way of accessing and shaping it. He leaned forward. You rely on bloodline traits, your power of destruction, for example, and complex incantations and circles to achieve your effects. It's a crutch. You're asking the world to bend to your will through a complex set of requests. A shinobi forces the world to bend through the sheer force of their own internal power. He held up his hand, and a perfect, swirling blue sphere of chakra, a Rasengan, spun to life in his palm, silent and impossibly dense. The devils stared at it, their senses screaming at the concentration of raw power held in such a stable, simple form. No incantation, Naruto stated, letting the Rasengan dissipate. No magic circle, just pure shape and nature manipulation. Magic, is the equivalent of a child shouting at a rock, hoping it will move. My jutsu is the hammer that smashes it to dust. The insult hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Rias's face flushed with anger. You may be powerful, but you don't understand the subtleties of our arts. I don't need to, Naruto countered calmly. When you have a cannon, you don't worry about the subtleties of a slingshot. Now, stop wasting my time with basic history lessons. Tell me about dimensional magic. Tell me how you brought me here. Lord Bale stepped forward, his expression grim. The ritual was based on ancient texts, a brute force method of tearing a hole between worlds and targeting a being of immense power. It is not an exact science. It required the combined energy of myself, Searsex, and the entire Grimoire household. With Rias and her peerage as the focal point. So you fired a cannon into the dark and hoped you'd hit something, Naruto surmised. And you can't reverse it. It wasn't a question. He already knew the answer. The failed reverse summoning had told him that much. Reversing the process would be exponentially more difficult, Sirzex admitted carefully. The energy requirements would be astronomical. We would need to pinpoint your exact home dimension from an infinite number of possibilities. It is a theoretical problem we are working on. Naruto stared at him. Is Sage Senses analyzing the subtle fluctuations in Sirzex's aura, the minute tells in his heart rate and vocal tone. It was a lie. A well-crafted, plausible lie, but a lie nonetheless. They weren't working on it. They couldn't. I see, Naruto said, his voice devoid of emotion. He leaned back in his chair, the picture of calm. But inside, a cold certainty settled in his gut. They had no intention of sending him home. They couldn't, and even if they could, they wouldn't. He was too valuable a weapon. He had his answer. Now, he needed to gauge the quality of the weapon they thought they had acquired. You've shown me your books, Naruto said, standing up. Now show me your soldiers. Rias Grimori, you and your peerage, meet me in the main courtyard in 10 minutes. I want to see this power you're all so proud of. The courtyard was a vast, paved expanse, large enough to host a small army. Rias stood with her peerage, a collection of young but powerful devils. Kiba Yudo, the handsome knight, rested a hand on the hilt of his sword. Akano Himahima, the alluring queen, had a sadistic smile playing on her lips as small sparks of lightning danced at her fingertips. Kaneko Tuju, the small rook, stood with her arms crossed, her petite frame belying a strength that could shatter stone. And behind them were the bishop, Asia Argento, a healer, and the pawn, Gaspar Vladi, a timid vamp. Naruto's senses told him had a strange power over time. Naruto walked to the center of the courtyard, his hands in his pockets. He wore no armor, held no weapon. He looked utterly relaxed. All of you, he said, his voice carrying easily across the space. Come at me at once. Don't hold back. Try to kill me. It'll be better practice. Kiba was the first to move. For my master's honor, he yelled, vanishing in a burst of speed that would have been impressive to a genin. He reappeared behind Naruto, his sword already swinging in a deadly arc aimed at Naruto's neck. Sword birth. Dozens of demonic swords erupted from the ground, aiming to impale Naruto from all directions. Naruto didn't turn. He didn't even take his hands out of his pockets. He took a single, casual step to the left. Kiba's blade sliced through empty air, the swords erupting from the ground missed by a hair's breadth. Before the knight could even register his failure, Naruto's elbow shot backwards in a brutally efficient jab. Connecting with Kiba's stomach, the air rushed out of the boy's lungs in a pained gasp, and he crumpled to the ground, out of the fight. Too slow, Naruto commented, his eyes flicking up to the sky. Akano was already there, a massive storm cloud of holy lightning crackling above her. Era, don't get cocky, she purred. Now, be a good boy and get struck down. A colossal bolt of golden lightning, a fusion of demonic and holy power, lanced down towards him. Naruto finally took one hand out of his pocket. He raised it, palm open towards the sky. He molded a wisp of wind chakra, a technique so basic it was taught to academy students. He didn't create a gale or a recentrican. He just disrupted the air. He created a pocket of shifting pressure that met the lightning bolt. The holy lightning, an attack that could vaporize a high-class devil, harmlessly dissipated into the atmosphere, its energy scattered in 1,000 directions. Akano stared from the sky, her seductive smile replaced by slack-jawed disbelief. A shadow fell over him. Kaneko, her immense physical strength boosted by senjutsu, was dropping on him from above, her fist cocked back to deliver a blow that could level the building behind him. You're open, was all Naruto said. He didn't try to meet her strength with his own. He simply shifted his weight at the last possible second. His hand shot out, not to block, but to guide. He caught her wrist, redirecting the force of her blow. He pivoted, using her own immense momentum to swing her past him and into the ground. The stone of the courtyard cracked under the impact. But the force was her own. She lay in the shallow crater, dazed and winded. Naruto stood amidst the wreckage of their coordinated assault, not a speck of dust on his clothes, his other hand still in his pocket. Rias watched, her face pale, her confidence utterly shattered. Her peerage, her family, the pride of her house, had been dismantled in less than 30 seconds without the man even breaking a sweat. It wasn't a fight, it was a lesson. He appeared in front of her. Not with a burst of speed, but with a flicker of movement so fast it seemed like teleportation. The cold, hard edge of a kunai, formed from pure, black chakra, rested against the soft skin of her throat. "This is the power you were going to use to force me to breed?" he asked, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. "This is the strength you're relying on to face a world-ending threat? You're not warriors. You're children playing with matches in a munitions depot." He let the kunai dissolve. He turned, his back on her and her defeated peerage, and walked away, leaving them in a stunned, humiliated silence. The message had been delivered with brutal efficiency. That evening, Naruto stood on his balcony, going over the day's events. The lie about sending him home was the key. It meant they saw him as a permanent asset. He was a prisoner, and they were the wardens. A soft rustling of leaves from the gardens below drew his attention. He dropped from the balcony, landing silently in the shadows of a manicured hedge. A private garden, hidden from the main palace. Yasaka was waiting for him, standing beside a stone lantern that cast a soft, golden glow. Her expression was serious. "Your demonstration was informative," she began, her voice a low murmur. "They needed to understand the difference between us," Naruto replied. Emerging from the shadows. "They are arrogant, but they are not fools. They understand it now," Yasaka said. "Which is why I needed to speak with you alone. Bale's plan is not universally supported. The descendants of the original Saiyans, the old Saiyan faction, see Sirzex and the other new leaders as usurpers. They would see your presence here as a sign of weakness, an opportunity to sow chaos." "Let them try," Naruto said with a shrug. "It is not that simple," she insisted. "They are allied with the Chaos Brigade. They have agents everywhere. You cannot trust anyone in this palace. The Grimoire family only shows you what they want you to see." She stepped closer, her amber eyes locking with his. "The Yukai value balance, and we value our independence. We were forced into this alliance. But we are not their servants. I propose an exchange. My faction's intelligence network for your perspective. We can help each other navigate the coming storm." It was a shrewd political move. She was offering him a lifeline, an alternative source of information, a way to see beyond the gilded walls of his cage. In return, she gained the tacit protection of the most powerful being in the world. "What's the first piece of information you have for me?" Naruto asked, testing her. Yasaka's expression turned grim. "The seals containing trihexa are not merely weakening due to conflict. Someone is actively unraveling them. Someone with knowledge of primordial magic, older than the devils themselves." Before Naruto could process this, a familiar, flat voice spoke from the top of the garden wall. "She's telling the truth. But the other one lied to you." Ophis was there, perched like a small, gothic gargoyle, looking down at them. Yasaka tensed immediately, but Ophis's attention was fixed solely on Naruto. "The red-haired man," she said, referring to Sirzex. "He lied about getting you home. I can feel the tear they made. It is not a door they can reopen. It is a wound in the world. Wounds scar over. Soon, the path back to your home will be gone forever." Naruto's posture didn't change, but Yasaka could feel the temperature drop by several degrees. The casual, almost lazy demeanor he projected was gone, replaced by an aura of absolute zero. Ophis pushed herself off the wall, floating down to hover in front of Naruto. She held out her hand, and a small, writhing symbol of pure darkness, like a tiny, coiled snake, materialized above her palm. "This is a piece of me. Take it. It will let you feel the wound as I do. You will know when it is about to close." Naruto looked at the swirling vortex of nothingness. He could feel its immense power, a piece of infinity itself. He reached out and closed his hand around it. The energy didn't burn or freeze, it simply was. It merged with his chakra, a cold, dark spot in the bright sun of his own power. And through it, he could feel it. A distant, aching wrongness in the fabric of space-time. The wound. And Ophis was right. It was closing. Slowly, but irrevocably. "Why are you helping me?" Naruto asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "You are strong," Ophis stated, as if it were the only reason that mattered. "When you are done here, you will help me get my silence back from Great Red." It is a good bargain. She vanished. Yasaka watched Naruto, her expression filled with concern. She had seen him angry, she had seen him dismissive. But she had never seen this. The look on his face was not one of rage. It was a look of chilling, absolute clarity. The look of a man who had just been given a definitive timeline and a singular, non-negotiable objective. He clenched his fist, the dark energy of ophis coiling within it. The devils hadn't just lied to him. They hadn't just trapped him. They had put a clock on his imprisonment. And it was ticking. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. A game of pawns and predators. The world had shrunk to the space between one breath and the next. Naruto sat cross-legged on the cold stone of the balcony. His eyes closed. The opulent suite, the alien city, the entire demonic realm had faded away. There was only the silence within, and the faint, discordant hum of the wound. Since Ophis had given him a piece of her power, he had spent hours in this state. The coil of infinity within him acted as an antenna, allowing him to perceive the tear in reality that had brought him here. It wasn't a place, it was a concept, a scar. He could feel its edges, frayed and chaotic. He could feel the pressure of two different realities grinding against each other. And he could feel it healing. The process was agonizingly slow, like the geological creep of a glacier, but it was undeniable. The scar was closing. It's fading, Kurama. Every day, a little more. The great fox stirred in the vast, internal landscape of his mind. Patience, Naruto. You're mapping it. That's more than those devil fools have managed. When the time comes, you'll be ready to tear it open again yourself. Kurama's voice was a low growl of contained fury. He hated this cage as much as Naruto did, hated the powerlessness, the sheer indignity of their situation. It's not just about power, Naruto sent back, his focus unwavering. This energy is different. The natural energy here is thin, tainted. For a jutsu of that magnitude, I'd need a colossal amount of sage energy, more than I can gather quickly. I need to understand the wound itself. Find its weakest point. He was no longer just a warrior. The years as Hokage had forced him to become a strategist, a problem solver who looked at a situation from a dozen angles before making a move. Power was a tool, but a tool was useless without the knowledge of how and when to apply it. Here, in a world that was not his own, knowledge was his most critical weapon. A polite, almost imperceptible knock at the door of his suite broke his concentration. He opened his eyes, the vibrant crimson of the underworld flooding back into his vision. The hum of the wound faded into the background, a constant, nagging reminder of his ticking clock. "Come in," he said, not bothering to get up. The door opened and Sears's Lucifer entered. He was dressed in his formal Satan attire, a look of calm, practiced diplomacy on his face. He had come alone. No guards, no graphia. A calculated gesture of respect, or perhaps an attempt to appear non-threatening. Naruto knew it was the former. They were past the point of pretending he could be threatened. "Uzumaki Dono," Sears began with a slight bow. "I hope I am not disturbing your meditations." "You are," Naruto replied simply. "What do you want?" Sears' smile didn't falter. "I've come to you with a matter of internal politics. And an opportunity." He conjured a chair for himself and sat, maintaining a respectful distance. "My sister, Rias, is to be engaged to a devil named Riser Phoenix. It is a political arrangement, one she is vehemently opposed to." Naruto remained silent, his expression unreadable. He'd heard of this from Yasaka's intelligence. An arranged marriage to a boorish, arrogant noble from a powerful house known for its regenerative abilities. A classic political power play. To settle the matter, Sears continued, a rating game will be held. A battle between Rias's peerage and Riser's. The winner of the game determines the outcome of the engagement. It is a tradition. A barbaric one, Naruto commented. You decide the fate of your family members with a glorified fistfight. It is our way, Sears said with a slight shrug. However, the Phoenix clan is old and powerful. Their support is crucial, especially now. A Grimoire loss would be a significant political blow. It would be seen as a sign of weakness. He leaned forward, his diplomatic mask slipping just anew. To reveal the shrewd politician beneath. I would like you to observe the game. Perhaps offer Rias some advice. Your presence alone in the viewing gallery would send a powerful message to certain factions. It would show that the Grimoire clan has a powerful new associate. Naruto finally looked at him, a cold glint in his eye. He saw the move for what it was. Sears was using him as a scarecrow, a symbol of power to intimidate his rivals. He was being paraded like a prize. And what do I get in return for being your associate? Naruto asked. Continued access to our knowledge, Sears offered smoothly. And our full cooperation in researching your way home. The lie was so bald-faced, so effortless, that Naruto almost laughed. But he didn't. He had a better idea. He would play their game. But he would play it for his own stakes. Fine, Naruto said, standing up and stretching. I'll watch your little game. I'll even talk to your sister. But my advice comes at a price. When she wins, Rias Grimoire will owe me a favor. An open-ended one, to be called in at my discretion. And you, Lord Lucifer, will grant me unrestricted access to the deepest levels of your library. No more guided tours, no more curated selections of texts. Everything. Sears hesitated. Unrestricted access was a security risk of the highest order. But the political capital to be gained from a victory, especially a victory overseen by their new powerhouse, was immense. And Rias owing Naruto a favor, that could be a useful leash. Agreed, Sears said after a moment. He had made the calculation. In his mind, he had just won the negotiation. Naruto knew better. He had just been given the keys to the armory. He found Rias in the Grimoire training grounds, a large, domed chamber where she was blasting craters into a rock wall with her power of destruction. Her peerage watched from the sidelines, their expressions a mixture of concern for their master and lingering humiliation from their encounter with Naruto. You're wasting your energy, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the sound of her last explosion. Rias spun around, her face flushed with exertion and anger. What do you want? Come to mock me again? Your brother asked me to give you advice for your fight, Naruto said, ignoring her tone. He walked towards the center of the room. The first piece of advice is to stop this pointless tantrum. You're attacking a wall. A wall doesn't have weak points. A wall doesn't get tired. It doesn't bleed. Your opponent will. He stopped and faced her. I saw your fight in the courtyard. All of you. You have power. But you have no strategy. You, knight, he said, his gaze flicking to Kiba, you lead with your strongest attack, assuming your speed is absolute. It isn't. You, queen, he looked at Akeno. You rely on overwhelming firepower from a distance, leaving yourself vulnerable if someone closes that distance. And you, rook, his eyes fell on Kaneko, you are a battering ram. Strong, direct, and easily deflected by anyone who understands leverage. He then looked back at Rias. And you are the worst of them all. You think that because you are the king, your only job is to be the final, most powerful piece. You stand back, directing your pawns, and waiting for an opening to use your big, flashy power. That's not a king. That's a liability. The air crackled with tension. Rias's hands clenched, crimson energy swirling around them. And what would you know about being a king? I was the leader of the largest hidden village in the world, Naruto said, his voice calm and steady. But carrying the unmistakable weight of authority. I led an army that saved the world. I know that a true leader doesn't stand behind their soldiers. They stand with them. They are the linchpin, the fulcrum that makes the entire strategy work. Your peerage is not a collection of disposable pieces. They are extensions of your will. Their strengths should cover your weaknesses, and why? Our strategy should amplify their strengths. He walked up to her, his gaze intense. This riser finesse. He regenerates. Hitting him with your power of destruction is like trying to empty the ocean with a bucket. It might make a splash, but the ocean will still be there. You cannot out-damage his healing. So, you don't fight his strength. You attack his weakness. And what is his weakness? Rias asked, her anger being slowly replaced by grudging curiosity. Every power has a source, a core, Naruto explained. His regeneration is fueled by his demonic energy. It is not infinite. You don't need to destroy him. You just need to make him expend more energy healing than he can recover. Overwhelm him, not with one big attack, but with 100 smaller ones from all directions. Keep him constantly regenerating minor wounds. Harass him, exhaust him, bleed him dry, make his greatest strength his undoing. And while your peerage is doing that, Naruto's voice dropped, you will not be waiting for your grand finale. You will be hunting his other pieces. Dismantle his team, isolate the king, and then, when he is tired, alone, and his flames are burning low, you will strike. Not as a king finishing a game, but as a predator delivering the final, killing blow. He left them there, the weight of his words hanging in the air. He hadn't taught them a new move. He had given them a new way to think. A shinobi's mindset. And for the first time, Rias Grimori began to understand the vast, terrifying gap that lay between them. The rating game was held in a pocket dimension, a perfect replica of the Kuo Academy campus where Rias and her peerage operated in the human world. Naruto watched from a luxurious viewing box, a pane of magically treated crystal giving a panoramic view of the battlefield. He was flanked by Sirzex and Lord Bale. Yasaka had also invited herself, seating herself near Naruto with a knowing smile. Representatives from several other pillar houses were present, the IR faces masks of polite interest that barely concealed their naked ambition and schadenfreude. Riser Phoenix and his all-female peerage were the picture of arrogance. He postured and preened, confident in his victory. Rias and her team, by contrast, were tense but focused. The game began. At first, Rias followed Naruto's strategy. They didn't engage Riser directly. Kiba and Kaneko engaged his frontline pieces with hit-and-run tactics. While Akeno provided long-range harassment, they were forcing Riser's peerage to burn energy, creating openings. It was working. Rias, instead of standing back, was moving with her team, coordinating their attacks, picking off Riser's isolated pieces one by one. Her strategy is unusually sophisticated, one of the nobles muttered. Sirzex merely smiled. My sister is full of surprises. His eyes, however, flicked to Naruto. But Riser was a high-class devil for a reason. And his regenerative ability was a formidable obstacle. He allowed his pieces to be sacrificed, weathering the storm. His own power undiminished. He healed every minor injury Rias's team inflicted on him instantly. Eventually, through sheer attrition and overwhelming power, he dismantled Rias's team. Kaneko was retired. Kiba was overwhelmed. Akeno was grounded. Finally, it was just Rias, alone and exhausted, facing an unharmed Riser in the center of the schoolyard replica. It's over, my dear Rias, Riser gloated. His body wreathed in orange flames. You fought well, but you cannot defeat an immortal Phoenix. Now, be a good girl and surrender. Our wedding awaits. In the viewing box, the mood was grim. Lord Bale's face was like stone. The other nobles began to whisper amongst themselves. The Grimori gambit had failed. A shame, Yasaka murmured to Naruto. She had a sound strategy, but not the stamina to execute it. Naruto said nothing. He simply raised his teacup, taking a slow, deliberate sip. His eyes were narrowed, his sage senses focused entirely on the battlefield below. He could feel it, Riser's demonic core, a blazing inferno of power, but a finite one. It was strained, flickering slightly from the constant regeneration. He was arrogant, but his power had limits. As Riser lunged for the defeated Rias, Naruto moved. He set his teacup down with a soft click. He lifted his right hand, his index finger pointed towards the crystal screen. No one else seemed to notice. He focused a minuscule, almost non-existent amount of chakra into his fingertip. He didn't mold it into an element or a shape. He molded it into a concept, a needle. A single, invisible, felt thread of pure chakra shot from his finger. It passed through the magical barriers of the viewing box as if they weren't there. It crossed the dimensional boundary into the game space, silent and unseen. It honed in on Riser's blazing aura and, with microscopic precision, pierced it, sinking into the very center of his demonic core. On the battlefield, Riser froze mid-lunge. A look of profound confusion crossed his face. His flames sputtered. The overwhelming pressure of his aura vanished. He felt empty, weak. The connection to his power, to his very essence, felt choked, as if a dam had been placed on the river of his strength. Rias, seeing the impossible, didn't hesitate. It was the opening Naruto had told her to wait for. With the last of her strength, she gathered a sphere of pure, crackling power of destruction. It wasn't large, but it was incredibly dense. It's over, Riser, she gasped, and launched the attack. Without the endless well of his regeneration to draw upon, Riser Phoenix met the attack head-on. The sphere of ruin struck him in the chest, and for the first time, the damage was not erased. His body disintegrated into motes of red light. Riser Phoenix has been retired. The winner is Rias Grimori. A synthesized voice announced. Silence. Utter, profound silence reigned in the viewing box. The nobles stared, mouths agape. Lord Baal and Searsex were on their feet, their eyes wide not with victory, but with a dawning, terrifying understanding. They looked from the screen to Naruto, who was calmly picking up his teacup again. He had never moved from his seat. He had broken no rules. He had not entered the game. He had not launched an attack. And yet, he had been the architect of the entire victory. With a gesture no one had even seen, he had bypassed T.'s most secure magical constructs and surgically neutered one of the most powerful young devils in the underworld. The message was no longer subtext. It was a declaration, written in blazing letters for all to see. He was not their scarecrow. He was not their associate. He was a force of nature operating on a level they couldn't even begin to comprehend. Naruto took another sip of his tea, his G's meeting Searsex's over the rim of the cup. The unspoken message was crystal clear. This is the difference between us. And don't you ever forget it. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The whispers of the dead and the roar of the living. The silence in the viewing gallery was a fragile thing, stretched thin and threatening to shatter. The nobles of the 72 Pillars, who had come expecting either a predicta political merger or a humiliating Grimori defeat, were left with an outcome they couldn't comprehend. They stared at the crystal screen, at the image of a triumphant but exhausted Rias Grimori, and then their eyes, one by one, were drawn to the placid figure of Naruto Uzumaki, who was calmly placing his empty teacup back on its saucer. Lord Baal's face was a mask of thunderous fury and dawning horror. Searsex, ever the politician, had composed himself, but the slight tremor in his hand as he stroked his chin betrayed his inner turmoil. They hadn't just miscalculated, they had introduced a variable into their world's delicate equation that obeyed no known laws of mathematics. An unexpected turn of events, a devil with the crest of the House of Citri murmured, his voice loud in the quiet room. The Lady Grimori's last attack was, remarkably potent. It was a probe, a desperate attempt to frame the impossible event in a way that made sense. Yasaka, who had been watching Naruto with an unreadable expression, let out a soft, musical laugh. Potent, indeed, she said, her voice carrying a clear note of amusement. She looked directly at Naruto. One might almost think she had help from a god. The word, God, hung in the air like a death sentence. It was an accusation, a challenge, and a statement of fact all at once. The devils flinched. They fought gods, they made pacts with them, they killed them. But they didn't invite them to sit in their viewing galleries. Naruto met Yasaka's gaze, a flicker of a smile touching his lips. It was a shared moment of understanding. She knew. She didn't know how, but she knew. He stood up, the movement drawing every eye in the room. The terms were met, he said, his voice calm and directed at Searsex. I expect my access to the library to be arranged immediately. Rias Grimori owes me a favor. I'm sure she will be eager to repay her debt. He turned and walked towards the exit, the assembled nobles parting before him like the Red Sea. He didn't need to say another word. His actions had spoken volumes, and the whispers that would now spread through the underworld would be a far more effective tool of intimidation than any threat he could make. He hadn't just declared himself a new player on the board. He had flipped the entire board over. The deepest level of the Grimori Library was called the Archive of Heresies. It was not a place of books on shelves, but a vast, cold cavern, where singular, heavily bound tomes rested on stone pedestals, each sealed with potent magical wards. This was where the forbidden Nold GE was kept. Texts on the creation of the universe, treatises on the nature of God and the original Lucifer, and, most importantly, the raw, unfiltered theories of dimensional magic. The air hummed with suppressed power. Naruto walked through the chamber, his sage senses on full alert. He could feel the lingering thoughts and emotions of the long-dead authors clinging to their work: desperation, madness, genius, fear. He ran his fingers over the cover of a book bound in what looked like dragon hide. An analysis of dimensional torsion, the title read in the demonic script he could now decipher with ease. He spent hours there, not reading, but absorbing. He didn't need to open the books. By placing his hand on them, he could feel the flow of intent, the structure of the theories within. He was looking for a pattern, a foundational principle that the devils had missed. Their magic was intricate, based on complex equations and appeals to ancient laws. It was like trying to build a skyscraper with lace. His own understanding of space-time jutsu, the flying Raijin, the summoning jutsu, even Kagaya's dimension hopping, was far more visceral and direct. It was about manipulating space itself, not asking its permission. He could feel the flaw in their thinking. They saw dimensions as separate rooms in a house. He knew they were just different frequencies on the same radio dial. The problem wasn't building a door. It was finding the right frequency to tune into. He was so engrossed that he barely registered the sound of the great stone door opening. Rias stood there, dressed not in her school uniform or noble attire, but in simple, casual clothes. Her peerage was not with her. She looked smaller, more vulnerable, without the trappings of her station. "Uzumaki-san," she said, her voice hesitant. "Your payment is ready." Naruto turned from a pedestal holding a book that seemed to radiate a palpable aura of despair. "Payment? My brother granted you a favor from me," she said, her cheeks tinged with pink. "I am here to honor it." She clearly expected him to demand something of her, something demeaning or difficult, a final twist of the knife to cement her humiliation. Naruto studied her for a moment. He saw the pride warring with the gratitude, the fear warring with a newfound respect. This was the moment that would define their future relationship. He could treat her as a conquered foe, or he could begin to forge her into a potential ally. "Good," he said, turning back to the books. "I need information, not the kind your brother or father would give me. I need to know about the fringes, the cults, the forgotten gods, the whispers in the dark. I need to know about anyone who has ever studied primordial creation magic, the kind of power that existed before devils or angels. Your family keeps the official records. I need the unofficial ones. The rumors, the things high-class devils pretend don't exist. That is the favor you will grant me. You will be my eyes and ears outside these palace walls." Rias was stunned. This was not what she expected. He wasn't demanding servitude. He was asking for her help. He was treating her like a resource, an equal. "Why?" she asked, genuinely confused. "Because your brother lied to me," Naruto stated simply. "He pretends he's trying to find a way to send me home. He isn't." Ophis confirmed it. "The tear in reality that brought me here is closing. Permanently. If I'm going to get home, I have to do it myself. And the magic that brought me here was a brute force imitation of something much older. I need to find the original blueprint. Your family's enemies, the Chaos Brigade, the old Satan faction, they are meddling with these ancient powers. They might be my only clue." He looked at her, his cerulean eyes holding no malice, only a fierce, burning determination. "You owe me a victory, Rias Grimori. Help me find the knowledge I need, and your debt will be paid." For the first time since he had arrived, Rias saw past the terrifying power, past the arrogant conqueror. She saw a man desperately trying to get home, a man as trapped as she had felt in her engagement to Riser. And in that moment, something shifted. Her resentment gave way to a grudging, but genuine, desire to help. "I will do it," she said, her voice firm. "I thank you for what you did in the game. Don't thank me," Naruto said, turning back to the archive. "Just don't get in my way." Deep within a shadowed corner of the underworld, in a fortress built from black, unholy ice, the mood was far from celebratory. Kryuzuri Asmodeus, a descendant of the original Satan Asmodeus, slammed his fist on a stone table, cracking it down the middle. "He cheated," Kryuzuri roared, his handsome face twisted in a mask of rage. "There is no other explanation. Riser Phoenix, for all his idiocy, is not so weak as to be defeated by that Grimori brat." The summon was involved. Around the table, other figures cloaked in shadow murmured in agreement. These were the core members of the old Satan faction, devils who believed the current Satans were illegitimate pretenders who had weakened the demonic race with their peace treaties and bloodline mingling. An older, more calculating devil named Shalba Beelzebub raised a hand for silence. "Rage is pointless, Kryuzuri. The fact remains that the Grimoire faction now has a being of immeasurable power at their disposal. Our agents in the palace say he dismantled Rias's entire peerage in seconds without effort. This display at the raiding game was a message to us. Then we will send a message back. A female devil hissed from the shadows. We will show them the price of bringing an outsider into our affairs. A direct assault on the Grimoire Palace is suicide, Shalba countered. Not with him in it. We need to test him. Gauge his strengths, find a weakness. We need to draw him out, away from the seat of Sirzex's power. Kryuzuri's rage subsided, replaced by a cruel, calculating smile. Draw him out. I have a better idea. We will bring the fight to the Grimoire girl's favorite playground. The human world. Kuo Town. We will slaughter every human in that city and pin the blame on her for failing to protect her territory. Let's see how her pet, God, responds when faced with the might of a true devil. Shalba considered this. It was brutal, chaotic, but it had a certain tactical appeal. It would force Naruto's hand, humiliate the Grimoire name, and create widespread chaos that they could exploit. Very well, Shalba agreed. Prepare a unit. We will make a demonstration. Let the world see what happens when the old ways are forgotten. The air in Kuo Town was bright and clean, a stark contrast to the oppressive crimson gloom of the underworld. Naruto stood on the roof of the Kuo Academy building. The sun warm on his face. It had been weeks since the raiding game. Weeks of poring over forbidden texts, of cross-referencing Rias's carefully gathered rumors with Yasaka's intelligence reports. He was beginning to form a picture, a pattern of forgotten rituals and places of power. He had come to the human world with Rias and her peerage under the pretense of observing their operations. In reality, he wanted to feel the natural energy of this world for himself. It was much richer than the underworld's, purer, easier to gather. He was in the middle of drawing the gentle, vibrant energy into his system when the world went wrong. A wave of malevolent, suffocating power washed over the entire town. The sky, a moment before a brilliant blue, was instantly blotted out by a swirling vortex of black and purple clouds. The air grew cold, and a palpable aura of dread descended on the city. Below, Naruto could hear the first screams of panic. What is this? Rias shouted, appearing on the roof beside him. Her crimson aura flaring, her entire peerage was with her, their faces pale with shock. Naruto's sage mode flared to life, his eyes taking on their golden, cross-slitted appearance. His senses expanded, painting a terrifying picture in his mind. It's a wide-scale terror field, he said, his voice grim. They've isolated the entire town from the rest of the world. And they're not alone. Dozens of demonic energy signatures, far more vicious and chaotic than the devils he'd met so far, flared to life all across the city. They were slaughtering civilians indiscriminately. Leading them were two signatures that burned with a cold, ancient fire. The old Satan faction, Rias breathed, her eyes wide with horror. Here, before she could give an order, a figure materialized in the sky above them. It was Kryuzuri Asmodeus, clad in ornate, black armor, a sadistic grin on his face. Rias Grimoire, he boomed, his voice magically amplified to carry across the city. You have defiled the honor of the devil race by consorting with this outworlder. For your crime, your precious territory will be cleansed in a baptism of blood. He raised his hand, and a swirling sphere of concentrated demonic energy formed, crackling with a power that dwarfed anything Riser Phoenix had wielded. It was aimed not at them, but at the main school building, where hundreds of terrified students were huddled. Rias and her peerage moved to intercept, to create a barrier, but they were too slow, too far away. The attack was a statement, a declaration of war, and it was a fatal mistake. Naruto vanished from the rooftop. He didn't use a flicker of speed. One moment he was there, the next he was gone. He reappeared in the sky, directly in the path of Kryuzuri's attack. He didn't raise a shield or prepare a jutsu. He held up one hand and simply caught the sphere of destructive energy. It did not explode. It did not struggle. The raging vortex of demonic power was instantly, totally, and effortlessly suppressed, collapsing in on itself until it was nothing more than a wisp of smoke in his palm. Kryuzuri's arrogant grin froze on his face. In the city below, the rampaging devils stopped their slaughter. Their heads snapping up to the sky, their primal instincts screaming at them that a predator of unimaginable power had just entered the field. Naruto floated in the air, the golden cloak of the Sage of Six Paths burning around him with the intensity of a star. 9 truth-seeking orbs materialized behind him, black spheres that drank the very light. He looked at Ryuzuri, his expression not of anger, but of utter, chilling disappointment. "You're the one in charge of this pathetic display?" Naruto asked, his voice calm, yet it echoed across the silenced city. "You kill defenseless people to make a political point. You're not a true devil. You're not even a warrior. You're just a coward." He raised his other hand. "And I don't have time for cowards." A chakra rod, black as night, extended from his palm. It was not a grand or flashy attack. It was precise, surgical. He moved, crossing the distance between them in a time so short it couldn't be measured. Ryuzuri, a high-class devil of a Satan-descended house, a being who could level mountains, didn't even have time to raise a defense. The rod pierced his shoulder, not with a spray of blood, but with a clean, sizzling sound. The black material of the rod pulsed once, and Ryuzuri's entire demonic energy system was thrown into chaos, short-circuited by a power that was its conceptual opposite. He screamed, a high, thin sound of agony and disbelief, and plummeted from the sky, crashing into the street below, utterly defeated. Naruto turned his gaze upon the rest of the city, his golden eyes sweeping over the dozens of other devils. They were frozen in terror. He didn't shout, he didn't threaten, he just spoke, and his voice was the promise of an ending. "Leave, now, or join him." The terror field shattered, the black clouds evaporated, the dozens of powerful devils, without a moment's hesitation, tore open panicked teleportation circles and fled, tripping over each other in their haste to escape the being that had just neutralized their leader with a single, contemptuous touch. Within 10 seconds, the battle was over. The sun shone down on a terrified, wounded city, and on the lone golden figure floating in the sky. A silent, terrifying guardian who had just announced to the entire underworld that the game was over, and the real war had just begun. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Scars of the City and the Echoes of a God. The silence that followed the devil's panicked retreat was heavier than the terror field that had preceded it. It was a silence filled with the scent of ozone, the distant sound of weeping, and the soft, settling dust of damaged buildings. The sun, now unobscured, seemed unnaturally bright, casting harsh light on the wounds carved into the heart of Kuo Town. Naruto descended, the golden cloak of his sage mode receding, though his senses remained razor-sharp. He landed in the main plaza, a place that, minutes before, had been a scene of indiscriminate slaughter. The asphalt was scarred with the marks of demonic energy. Broken shop windows stared out like vacant eyes. Rias and her peerage appeared beside him, their expressions a mixture of horror and shame. This was their territory, their responsibility, and they had been utterly powerless to protect it. "Asia," Rias commanded, her voice trembling but firm. "Heal who you can, now." The small, blonde bishop nodded, tears streaming down her face. She ran towards the nearest group of injured civilians, her hands glowing with a gentle, green light. Her twilight healing was a wondrous thing, a sakra. Deep power that could mend flesh and soothe pain. But it was a gentle rain trying to extinguish a forest fire. There were too many, too much. Naruto watched for a moment, his jaw tight. He walked over to a young woman lying near a shattered fountain. Her breathing was shallow, a piece of shrapnel from a demonic blast embedded in her chest. Asia was already overwhelmed on the other side of the plaza. The woman had seconds left. He knelt beside her. He didn't use medical ninjutsu. The damage was too severe, the internal bleeding too widespread. Instead, he placed a hand gently on her forehead. He reached past his chakra, past Kurama's vast reserves, and touched the core of his power, the yang half of the Sage of Six Paths, energy. The power of life force itself. He didn't unleash a wave of healing. He did something far more subtle. He released a tiny, infinitesimal spark of that life-giving energy into her. It wasn't a cure. It was a lifeline. Her ragged breathing stabilized. The gray pallor of her skin receded, replaced by a flush of color. The bleeding wouldn't stop, but her life force, which had been guttering like a candle in the wind, was now anchored, stabilized, refusing to be extinguished. She would live long enough for proper medical attention. He moved to the next victim. And the next. A touch. A spark. He moved through the wounded with an unnatural calm, his face a mask of concentration. He wasn't healing them. He was simply telling death that it could not have them. Not yet. Akeno watched him, her usual flirtatious demeanor gone, replaced by profound awe. What is he doing? She whispered. That's not sacred magic. It's not demonic. It feels like creation itself. Rias couldn't answer. She was watching a being who could cripple one of the strongest devils of his generation with a touch. Now using that same touch to hold the fragile thread of human life intact. The sheer scale of his power, its versatility, was something her mind could barely process. He wasn't just a warrior. He was something more fundamental. As he worked, golden portals, swirling with fox fire, began to open around the plaza. Yasaka stepped through the first one, her expression grim. She was not alone. Behind her came a dozen yokai, kitsune healers with serious, compassionate faces. They immediately fanned out, their own nature-based healing arts adding to the effort. Yasaka walked directly to Naruto. My agents reported the attack, she said, her voice low. I came as soon as I could. To bring an army or to bring healers? It seems you have made the army unnecessary. Healers are better, Naruto said, not looking up from the elderly man whose heart he was stabilizing. This was a message, to me, through them. A foolish message, Yasaka agreed, kneeling beside him and placing her own hands, glowing with a soft green yujutsu, on the man's other injuries. To attack a tiger's cubs is to invite the tiger's wrath. The old Satan faction has misjudged you completely. They're not the only ones. Naruto replied, a hard edge to his voice. He stood, his work in this area done. He looked at Yasaka, at her healers working seamlessly alongside Asia. You came. The Devil's W. Ho claim this as their territory sent one girl with a sacred gear. You, who have no political stake here, brought a team of specialists. The unspoken condemnation hung in the air. Yasaka simply nodded. As I told you, the yokai value balance, and we repay our debts. You saved my people from being entangled in a war we did not want. This is a small gesture in return. Their conversation was interrupted by a subtle shift in the atmosphere. A patch of shadow near a wrecked car deepened, coalesced, and from it stepped Ophis. She looked around at the devastation, her head tilted, her expression as blank as ever. It is loud here, she stated. The pain is a noise. She looked at Naruto. They used a weak imitation of my power to create their barrier. They are affiliated with the Chaos Brigade. We know, Naruto said. They are trying to damage the world, Ophis continued, her gaze unnervingly direct. Every large-scale conflict, every tear in reality, weakens the seals on Trihexa. They think they can control it when it is released. They are wrong. Her eyes narrowed slightly. They are also interested in you. Your power. It damages reality just by existing here. It puts a strain on the world. You are a walking earthquake. They might see you not as an enemy, but as a tool. With that cryptic warning, she melted back into the shadows and was gone. A tool to unseal a world-ending monster. It seemed to be a recurring theme. The news of the Kuo town invasion and its subsequent, brutal conclusion hit the underworld like a shockwave. In the Lucifuge estate, Searsex watched a magical projection of the event. His face pale. The recording, taken by a Grigori surveillance satellite, was chillingly clear. He saw Kryuzare's arrogant attack. He saw Naruto catch the blast. And he saw the contemptuous, effortless takedown that followed. Lord Bale stormed into the room, his face purple with rage. This is a disaster. The old Satan faction makes a mockery of us on our own territory. And our summoned weapon reveals a level of power that makes us look like children. The other pillars are laughing at us. Or worse, they are terrified of us, and of him. Let them be terrified, Searsex said, his voice quiet. He shut off the projection. We wanted a deterrent. We have one. Kryuzare Asmodeus is in our custody, his power core permanently damaged. The old Satan faction has been dealt a humiliating blow. Shalba Beelzebub will have to reconsider his strategy. Reconsider. Bale scoffed. He will escalate. And what of this monster we have chained ourselves to? He acted without orders. He did what he wanted. When he wanted. He is uncontrollable. He was never controllable, Sirzek's corrected, turning to face his father-in-law. His expression was grim. That was our first, and greatest, mistake. We didn't summon a weapon. We summoned a king from another world. A king who was stronger than all four of our Satans combined. Our relationship with him is no longer one of master and summon. It is one of negotiation. And right now, we have very little to bargain with. Sirzek walked to his window, looking out at the crimson sky. His grand plan to secure the future of the race had become a desperate gamble to simply survive the being he had brought into their lives. The balance of power in the underworld had been shattered, and he was no longer sure on which side of the fulcrum his own house stood. Later that night, Kuo Town was crawling with devil, cleanup crews, erasing memories, repairing buildings with magic, and generally trying to sweep the entire catastrophe under the rug. Naruto stood on the school roof once more, watching them work with a cynical eye. The door to the roof creaked open. It was Rias. Her face was pale and drawn in the moonlight. The events of the day had stripped her of her noble pride, leaving behind a raw, painful vulnerability. The last of the civilians are in the hospital, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The doctors say, it's a miracle. Dozens of people who should have died are in stable condition. They don't know why. She looked at him, her crimson eyes filled with a question she was afraid to ask. I just bought them some time, Naruto said, not wanting to explain the complexities of yang power. You did more than that, she said, walking to stand beside him at the edge of the roof. You saved my city. You saved my friends. You saved me. And I did nothing. I am the leader of this territory, and I was useless. The self-loathing in her voice was thick. My power, my peerage, it was all meaningless in the face of a real threat. We're just children playing a game, like you said. Naruto turned to look at her. He saw the proud princess shattered, but in her place, the first glimmer of a true queen was beginning to emerge. So what are you going to do about it? He asked, his tone not harsh, but challenging. Are you going to cry about it, or are you going to get stronger? How? She asked, a note of desperation in her voice. How can I ever get strong enough to face threats like that? To face you. You don't have to face me, he said. And you don't get stronger by just increasing your power output. You get stronger by understanding what power is. It's not about the size of your explosions. It's about control, precision, strategy. He looked out over the city. Today, I didn't level a city block to stop one man. I took him out with a single, precise strike that disabled him without killing him. That is strength. He turned back to her. You have the power of destruction. You think it's just about erasing things. But what if you could control it? What if you could shape it not into a blunt sphere, but into a needle? What if you could use it to erase not a person, but their magic? Their senses, their armor. That's the path to true power. Stop thinking like a king. Start thinking like a shinobi. Rias stared at him, a new kind of fire igniting in her eyes. He was offering her a path, a new philosophy. A way to be more than just the heiress of the Grimoire clan. The favor I am owed, Naruto said, his voice softening slightly. Forget it. The debt is paid. From now on, we are not master and debtor. We are allies. You give me the information I need to get home, and I will show you how to be strong enough to protect what's yours when I'm gone. That's the new deal. Rias looked at the hand he offered her. It was the hand of the being who had terrified her, humiliated her, and saved her, all in the span of a few weeks. It was the hand of a god, offering a mortal a chance to learn his secrets. She took it. Her grip was firm, her resolve forged anew in the fires of that day's tragedy. In his frozen fortress, Shalba Beelzebub reviewed the same footage as Sirzek's. He saw Kryuzare's pathetic defeat. But where Kryuzare saw a reason for rage, and Sirzek saw a reason for fear, Shalba saw something else entirely. He saw a puzzle. Incredible, he whispered to himself. Replaying the moment Naruto caught the demonic blast. He didn't nullify it with holy power. He didn't overpower it with his own energy. He absorbed it. He assimilated it. The energy simply ceased to exist. He replayed the final strike. And that rod, it didn't just injure Kryuzare. It severed his connection to his own magic. It is a power that operates on a conceptual level. He shut off the projection, a slow, reptilian smile spreading across his face. You cannot fight a concept with brute force, he mused. How do you kill a being who can turn your own power into nothing? You don't. You find a concept that is his antithesis. He stood and walked to an ancient, chained chest in the corner of his chamber. He ran a hand over the cold, silver locks, each one etched with a seal of holy scripture. The Chaos Brigade has been searching for the lost sacred gears, the Longinus, he murmured. But they are looking for weapons. They are thinking like soldiers. He tapped the chest. But the God of the Bible didn't just create weapons. He created systems. He created fail-safes. His smile widened. He had found his path. He wouldn't try to find a sword strong enough to kill Naruto Uzumaki. He would find a poison tailored specifically for his soul. A forgotten system, from the age of the biblical God, a conceptual weapon designed to unmake beings of divine power. The game as no longer about armies and territories. It was about ideology and philosophy. And Shalba Beelzebub was confident he could find a way to write the final, damning verse. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Devil's Bargain and the Fox's Wisdom. The Grimoire training grounds had become a place of profound frustration. The sounds of explosive power had been replaced by the sharp crack of a wooden training sword, the hiss of displaced air. And the grunts of exertion from devils being pushed far beyond their comfort zones. Naruto stood in the center of the arena, his posture relaxed, his hands clasped behind his back. Before him, Hiba Yuto lunged, his speed a blur, a demonic sword aimed at Naruto's heart. Naruto didn't move his feet. Just as the blade was about to connect, he shifted his weight, his torso swaying a few inches to the right. Hiba's momentum carried him past, and a light tap from Naruto's knuckles on the knight's wrist sent a jarring shock up his arm, causing his sword to clatter to the floor. Again, Naruto said, his voice calm. Hiba grit his teeth, sweat beading on his brow. For the past hour, he had attacked relentlessly, and for the past hour, Naruto had defeated him with nothing more than subtle movements and precise, minimal contact. He wasn't being overpowered, he was being systematically dismantled. You're a knight, Naruto explained to the exhausted devil. Ink that means you have to be the fastest. But speed without purpose is just wasted energy. You telegraph every move because you commit all your momentum to a single, straight line. Your opponent knows where you will be before you do. Feint, misdirect, make me react to a ghost, and then strike the opening you've created. Across the arena, Akeno and Kaneko were locked in a stalemate. Naruto had given them a simple, infuriating rule. Akeno was forbidden from using her lightning, and Kaneko was forbidden from making direct contact with her fists. Akeno, stripped of her greatest weapon, was forced to rely on her wits. Using her control of the elements to create gusts of wind and small tremors to keep the powerhouse rook off balance. Kaneko, in turn, couldn't just charge in. She had to learn to project her power. To strike the ground and use the resulting shockwave to attack, a technique that required a level of control she had never even considered. But the most grueling lesson was reserved for Rias. Naruto had placed a single, perfect leaf on the surface of a large bowl of water. Her task was to use her power of destruction to disintegrate the leaf without disturbing the water. For hours, she had failed. Every attempt, no matter how small she tried to make it, resulted in the water erupting, the bowl cracking, or the leaf being blown away by the sheer pressure of her untamed power. She was panting. Her demonic energy reserves dangerously low, her pride in tatters. It's impossible, she finally burst out, glaring at Naruto. This power is meant to erase things, not to perform delicate tricks. Naruto walked over to her. He held up his own hand, and in his palm, a tiny, perfect Rasengan, no bigger than a marble, spun silently. Its power was perfectly contained, a miniature galaxy of churning chakra. He reached down and gently touched the surface of the water with it. The water did not splash. The marble of energy spun against the surface, creating a tiny, perfect whirlpool. Your power is a flood, Naruto said, letting the Rasengan dissipate. Destructive, uncontrollable. You unleash it and hope it washes your problems away. But a flood can be dammed. It can be diverted. It can be weathered. He looked her in the eyes. True power is a river. You can narrow it to cut through stone, or you can widen it to nourish a field. You control its flow. You dictate its purpose. Stop trying to destroy the leaf. Just unmake it, tell a single point in space to cease to exist. He was not just teaching them techniques. He was rewiring their entire philosophy of combat. He was breaking down the blunt instrument of their demonic heritage and showing them how to reforge it into a shinobi's blade, precise, efficient, and deadly. The training was a form of hell, but for the first time. They felt like they were learning the true meaning of strength. The study in Rias's private quarters had become their war room. Maps of the human world and the underworld were spread across a large table, marked with symbols and notations. Rias, looking tired but energized, pointed to a cluster of markings in Europe. "It's just as you suspected," she said, her tone all business. Chaos Brigade attacks on our outposts were a feint. The real activity is centered on these locations. The Vatican's Forbidden Archives, a sealed Grigori research facility in Germany, an ancient, pre-Diluvian temple off the coast of Greece. They aren't looking for weapons or territory. They're on an archaeological dig. Naruto studied the map, his brow furrowed. The locations seemed random, but he trusted the pattern Rias had uncovered. What do they have in common? On the surface, nothing, Rias admitted. But when I cross-referenced them with the texts from the Archive of Heresies, they are all sites of major angelic fortifications during the Great War. Specifically, places where the God of the Bible was said to have enacted major works of creation or divine judgment. A golden portal shimmered into existence in the corner of the room. Yasaka stepped through, her expression serious. She carried a scroll in her hand. "The Lady Grimoire is correct," Yasaka said, her voice cutting through the quiet intensity of the room. She unfurled the scroll on the table. It was an older map, written in ancient Yukai script. "My own agents have confirmed the activity. The fallen angels are involved. They are searching for something related to their former master. We intercepted a coded message. It was heavily encrypted, but my mystics were able to pull 2 words from it: system and downfall." Naruto stared at the words. System, downfall. It wasn't a weapon. It was a concept. The God of the Bible, Naruto mused, piecing it together. He created the sacred gears. He created angels. He was a being of immense power. A creator. A smart creator builds fail-safes. What if he created a system not to win the war, but to ensure no other being could ever attain his level of power? A conceptual failsafe designed to unmake divine beings. The room went cold. Rias and Yasaka looked at him, the implication of his words sinking in. Shalba Beelzebub wasn't looking for a weapon to kill Naruto. He was looking for a delete button. "This changes things," Yasaka said, her voice grim. "This is not merely a threat to you, but to any being of divine or celestial power. Myself included. Ophis. The gods of every pantheon. Shalba is trying to get his hands on a weapon that could unravel the fabric of our entire world. He thinks he's a pawn in my game," Naruto said, his voice a low growl. "But he's playing a much more dangerous one, and he doesn't even know the rules." Later, after Rias had left to coordinate with her brother, Naruto and Yasaka found themselves in one of the Grimoire Palace's quiet, moonlit gardens. The frantic energy of their strategy session had given way to a heavy, contemplative silence. They walked along a path of smooth, gray stones, the only sound the soft rustle of Yasaka's kimono and the chirping of some nocturnal underworld insect. "You carry a heavy burden," Yasaka said softly, breaking the silence. She wasn't looking at him, but at the reflection of the crimson sky in a still pond. "You have the power to shatter this world, yet you spend your days teaching children how to control a leaf. The most important lessons are the hardest ones," Naruto replied, his gaze distant. "I know something of that," she said. She stopped and turned to face him, the soft glow of a stone lantern casting a warm light on her features. Her usual poise, the mask of the serene and powerful Yukai leader, had softened, revealing a hint of weariness. To be a leader is to be alone, even when surrounded by your people. To be the one who must always be strong, who can never show doubt. She looked at him, her amber eyes searching his. "What did you leave behind, Naruto Uzumaki? What is the price you pay for your strength?" It was the most direct, personal question anyone in this world had asked him. He didn't answer immediately. He thought of the stone faces on the mountain, of the ramen stand, of the view from his office. He thought of the crushing, suffocating peace he had yearned to escape. A dream, he finally said, his voice quiet. I achieved my dream. I became the leader I always wanted to be. I brought peace to a world that had only ever known war. A bitter, ironic smile touched his lips. And I found out that peace is quiet. There were no more dragons to slay. The great evil was gone. There was only tomorrow. And the day after. And the day after that. He met her gaze. And for the first time, he let her see past the sage, past the Hokage, to the man underneath. I was a warrior with no war to fight. Be careful what you wish for, I guess. I wanted a challenge. I wanted a purpose again. And the universe, in its infinite wisdom, gave me this. Yasaka saw it then. The profound loneliness of a god who had outlived his own purpose. He wasn't just a trapped warrior. He was an answered prayer left to rust in a forgotten temple. She felt a deep, unexpected pang of empathy for him. Her own life was a constant struggle for her people's survival, a duty she had never questioned. But what happened when that duty was fulfilled? What was left? She reached out, her fingers gently touching the back of his hand. It was not a romantic gesture. It was a simple, profound act of connection, a silent acknowledgement of their shared burden. You are not alone in this, Naruto-san, she whispered. The Yukai will stand with you. Not just for political convenience, but because a world where a power like the God-Slayer system exists as a world that is no longer in balance. And because a king should not have to fight his battles alone. Naruto looked down at her hand, then back to her eyes. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. In the quiet of that demonic garden, a true alliance was forged. Not in contracts or treaties, but in a moment of shared vulnerability and mutual respect. That night, Naruto did not sleep. He sat on his balcony, the vast, crimson-lit city of Lilith spread out before him. He closed his eyes and reached inward, touching the cold, dark spark of infinity that Ophis had gifted him. He let his senses expand, not searching for chakra or demonic power, but for the fundamental frequency of this reality. He found the scar, the wound of his summoning. It was weaker, the edges frayed and thin. The steady hum it had once emitted was now a discordant, wavering static. It was healing faster now, the process accelerated. He felt a profound sense of urgency, a cold dread that had nothing to do with Shalba or his plans. His path home was closing. Then he felt it. It was a tremor in the fabric of space-time, a flicker, like a bad connection. For a fraction of a second, a new tear, microscopic and unstable, opened somewhere far away. It wasn't a wound, it was a pinprick, but it hummed with an ancient, dangerous power. The same primordial magic he had been hunting in the archives. A small figure materialized beside him, her feet not touching the ground. Ophis. She didn't look at him. She stared out in the direction of the tremor. Her deadened eyes seeing things he could not. There, she said, her voice a flat whisper that seemed to cut through the silence of the night. They are touching the old laws. The laws of my father. The dragon of dreams. They are knocking on a door that should never be opened. She turned her head, her gaze finally locking onto him. For the first time, he saw something in her eyes beyond simple curiosity. It was a flicker of concern. Or perhaps, the draconic equivalent of it. They are not looking for a key to unmake a god, she said, her words chilling him to the core. They are looking for a key to unmake reality itself. And you are standing in the center of the lock. The tremor vanished. The pinprick in reality sealed itself. But the echo of it remained. A cold warning that resonated deep within Naruto's soul. Shalba's plan was more insane than he had imagined. The ticking clock was no longer just about his journey home. It was counting down to a catastrophe that could unravel creation. And he was, as Ophis had said, the unfortunate soul standing right at the epicenter. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Dragon's Maw and the Sage's Choice. The silence Ophis left behind was a vacuum, sucking all the warmth from the air on the balcony. Her final words echoed not in the ears, but in the soul. You were standing in the center of the lock. Naruto stood motionless, the vast demonic city below forgotten. The ticking clock was no longer a personal deadline, it was a doomsday countdown for a world he was beginning to begrudgingly care about. He felt a presence behind him and turned to see Yasaka, her usual serene composure replaced by a mask of cold fury. She had felt the dimensional tremor, the ripple of primordial law being abused. "They are not just grave robbers," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "They are trying to tear down the foundations of reality. The fools. They have a target," Naruto said, his mind racing, connecting the dots Rias and Yasaka had provided. The sights of divine creation. The whispers of a system and downfall. They're not just collecting components. They're on a pilgrimage, gathering the keys to unlock a final door. "Then we must find that door before they do," Yasaka stated, her 9 tails lashing once, a silent display of agitated power. A crimson magic circle flared to life on the balcony, and Rias stepped out, her face pale. "I felt it too, a wave of wrongness. What's happened?" Naruto didn't waste time. Shalba isn't just looking for a weapon. He's trying to unlock a power that can unmake reality itself. "We're out of time." Quote. The 3 leaders stood in a triangle of grim resolve. The politician, the sage, and the budding queen. The fate of their world rested on the next move they made. The emergency meeting of the 4 great Satans was a tense, volatile affair. Sirzex had convened at the moment Rias had relayed Naruto's warning. The faces of Seraphal Leviathan, Ajuka Beelzebub, and Falbium Asmodeus, projected as life-sized magical holograms, stared out with varying degrees of disbelief and alarm. A conceptual weapon that can unmake divine beings. A threat to reality itself. Falbium, the laziest of the Satans, was for once sitting bolt upright. "Sirzex, is your source reliable?" "My source," Sirzex said, his eyes flicking to the side of the throne room where Naruto stood with Rias and Yasaka. "As the being who crippled Kryuzuri Asmodeus with a touch and has forgotten more about ancient power than our entire library contains." Naruto stepped forward, drawing the full attention of the demonic rulers. "Your cousin, Ajuka," he said, his voice cutting through the political posturing, "is the smartest among you when it comes to magic theory. Ask him if it's possible." Ajuka Beelzebub, a handsome devil with an eternally calm, analytical expression, pushed his glasses up his nose. The god of the Bible was a master of system magic. The sacred gears are the most famous example. He didn't create things, he created self-sustaining concepts. It is theoretically plausible that he could have created an anti-system, a conceptual failsafe designed to erase other concepts. If such a thing fell into Shalba's hands, it would be catastrophic. "So what do we do?" Seraphal Leviathan demanded, her usual bubbly persona replaced with icy seriousness. "Declare war on the entire Chaos Brigade." "No," Naruto said. "A war is what they want. It would create the chaos they need to mask their final move and further weaken the seals on Trihexa. This requires a surgical strike. Shalba has one final location to visit, the place where this system is stored. We go there. We intercept him. We end this." "And where is that?" Sirzex asked. Rias stepped forward, placing a demonic data crystal on a pedestal. A holographic map sprang to life. "The Vatican. But not the public Vatican. There is a hidden subspace within its walls, known in the oldest heretical texts as the Sanctus Sanctorum. It was the biblical god's personal workshop. It is protected by seals that are anathema to demonic beings. A perfect hiding place," Ajuka murmured in appreciation. Quote, "We cannot send an army of devils into the heart of heaven's territory," Falbium argued. "It would violate a dozen treaties. It would be an act of war against the angels." "Then don't send an army," Naruto said, his patience wearing thin. "I am going. Yasaka is providing her elite. Rias and her peerage are coming with me." He looked at the 4 most powerful devils in the world as if they were junior chunin. "You can either sanction this mission and provide support, or you can stay here and debate politics while your cousin rips the engine out of reality. Your choice. But we are leaving in 1 hour." He turned and walked away, leaving the Satans in stunned silence. Sirzex looked at his peers. The choice was clear. Their power, their authority, meant nothing if their world ceased to exist. "Prepare a support contingent," he commanded. "We're putting our faith in the typhoon." The air in the heart of Vatican City crackled with a holy aura so potent it was almost suffocating to the small demonic contingent. They stood in a hidden antechamber, the entrance to the Sanctus Sanctorum before them. A solid gold door, 20 feet high, inscribed with Enochian script that burned with a white, celestial fire. "The seals are absolute," Akeno reported, her brow beaded with sweat. As a fallen angel, she could feel the raw, oppressive power rolling off the door. It's designed to repel anything with a trace of sin or demonic energy. We can't even touch it. Then we don't touch it, Naruto said. He turned to Rias. Remember what I taught you. Control. Precision. Don't destroy the door. Unmake the concept of the lock. Rias stepped forward, her face a mask of concentration. She held out her hand, and a swirling vortex of the power of destruction, no bigger than her fingertip, appeared. It was unstable, flickering dangerously. She took a deep breath, calming her mind, remembering the leaf on the water. The vortex stabilized, becoming a perfect, silent pinpoint of absolute ruin. She gently pressed it against the Enochian script. There was no explosion, no flash of light. The holy runes simply vanished. They were erased from existence, leaving a blank space on the golden door. With its locking mechanism conceptually unmade, the great door swung inward with a low groan, revealing the Sanctus Sanctorum. The space within was a paradox. It was a vast, white chamber that seemed to stretch into infinity. Yet felt claustrophobic. Floating in the sterile void were half-finished projects of a creator god. Blueprints for creatures that were never born, constellations that were never hung in the sky. And at the very center, floating above a crystalline dais, a monstrous being. It was a chimera of angelic design, stitched together from the mistakes of creation. It had the wings of a seraph, the body of a lion carved from holy light, and the head of a reptilian beast whose eyes wept tears of golden fire. It was a living security system, a guardian of forgotten secrets. It seems Shalba left a welcome party, Kiba said, drawing his sword. The creature roared, a sound that was both a symphony and a scream, and a wave of pure holy fire washed towards them. Engage, Naruto commanded, but he did not move to attack. He stood back, his arms crossed, watching. Rias and her peerage sprang into action, not as individual pieces, but as a single, coordinated unit. It was the shinobi philosophy made manifest. Kaneko didn't charge. She slammed her feet into the ethereal white floor, sending a shockwave of force to disrupt the beast's footing. Kiba, instead of a direct assault, used his speed to create dozens of afterimages, confusing the creature's senses. Akeno, unable to use her holy lightning against a holy beast, instead summoned chains of demonic lightning, not to damage, but to ensnare its wings. The chimera was powerful, its holy fire incinerating everything it touched, its claws of light tearing gashes in the white void. But the devils were no longer fighting with brute force. They were a swarm of hornets, stinging and retreating, Kiba creating openings, Kaneko exploiting them, Akeno binding and restricting. Yet, every wound they inflicted closed instantly, healed by the creature's sacred nature. It's no good, Rias shouted, dodging a swipe that could have torn her in half. It regenerates from everything. Every power has a source. Naruto called out, find the flaw in the system. His words sparked an idea in Rias's mind. She looked at Asia. Asia, it's a holy creature, but it's a corruption, a mistake. Can you heal a mistake? Asia's eyes widened in understanding. While the others kept the beast distracted, she clasped her hands together, her sacred gear, twilight healing, glowing with an intense, emerald light. Balance break, she cried out. An aura of pure, compassionate life force erupted from her, not an attack, but an offering. She didn't try to harm the chimera. She tried to heal the divine contradiction at its core. The chimera roared in agony as the green light washed over it. Its holy nature warred with the corruption in its soul. It began to glow brighter and brighter, the white light of its body turning unstable. Gasper, now, Rias commanded. The timid vampire, hidden in the shadows, opened his eyes. The world froze. The rampaging chimera, on the verge of self-destruction, was locked in a moment of time by the forbidden Belur view. Rias, Naruto's voice cut through the silence. Its core, unmake it. Rias saw it. In the center of the beast's chest, a chaotic sphere of divine energy flickered, the source of its being. With Gasper holding it in place, she had her opening. She poured all her focus, all her newfound control, into a single, needle-thin beam of destructive power. It struck the core. The time stop broke. The chimera did not explode. It simply dissolved, its light and form collapsing into nothingness, its roar fading into a final, peaceful sigh. They had done it. They had defeat the divine guardian not with overwhelming power, but with strategy, teamwork, and conceptual thinking. Naruto allowed himself a small, proud smile. The lesson had been learned. But their victory was short-lived. A projection of Shalba Beelzebub flickered into existence before them. He was standing in a dark cavern, and behind him rested the colossal, fossilized skeleton of a dragon that radiated an aura of profound dread. Shalba was clapping slowly, a mocking, condescending smile on his face. "Bravo, Grimori, and bravo to your pet. A magnificent display, truly. A shame it was all for nothing." "Shalba," Rias snarled. "It's over." "Oh, it's over, my dear. But I am the one who won," he said with a chuckle. "Did you really think I would keep my ultimate prize in my enemy's workshop? This was a diversion, a final test. While you were fighting my discarded pet, my forces were unearthing the true prize." He gestured behind him to a pulsating, obsidian object held in a containment field. It looked like a giant, black heart carved from solidified despair. "The God Slayer system isn't some angelic contraption," Shalba gloated. "It's the heart of the apocalypse dragon, Ophis, the dragon of downfall. Its very concept is anathema to divine order. Once I awaken it fully, its pulse will send out a wave that will not kill gods, but unwrite them from existence. And I have you to thank, Uzumaki. The dimensional instability caused by your presence was the final key I needed to bypass the primordial locks." The blood drained from the faces of Rias and her friends. Yasaka, who had been observing silently with her warriors, took an involuntary step back, her eyes wide with horrified recognition of the name Apophis. As Shalba laughed, Naruto felt a sharp, stabbing pain in his very soul. The spark of Ophis's power flared, and through it, he felt the wound, the scar leading to his world. It was collapsing. The dimensional energy Shalba's ritual had unleashed was acting like a universal coagulant, sealing all tears in reality. The path home, once a slowly closing door, was now slamming shut. He had minutes, maybe less. Shalba's projection began to fade. "Enjoy the end, everyone. It has been a pleasure." The projection vanished. The Sanctus Sanctorum was silent again, the hollow victory tasting like ash in their mouths. "Naruto-san," Yasaka whispered, sensing his inner turmoil, seeing the flicker of panic in his eyes that no one else could. Rias looked at him, her face a storm of emotions. She saw it too, the sudden, desperate urgency. "What is it?" Naruto didn't answer. He closed his eyes, focusing on the dying tether to his world. He could feel it, the scent of rain in the land of fire. The distant, faint chakra of his friends. Home. It was right there, a hair's breadth away. A door that was about to be locked and barricaded for all eternity. He could leave, right now. He could pour all his power into one final, desperate reverse summoning and tear his way through the collapsing scar. He could go home. He could leave this world to its fate, to be unridden by the mad dream of a dead dragon. Or he could stay. He could stay and fight for this strange, chaotic world full of arrogant devils, honorable yokai, and children trying their best to be warriors. He could stay and face a weapon that was designed to erase his very existence. He could stay, and be trapped here forever. He opened his eyes. They were no longer the eyes of a sage or a Hokage. They were the eyes of a man standing on the edge of a precipice, with the smoking ruins of one world behind him, the promise of another vanishing before him. Rias, Yasaka, Akano, Kiba, Kaneko, they all stared at him, the unspoken question hanging in the sterile air of the divine workshop. The fate of their reality now rested entirely on the choice of one unwilling, lonely god. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Severed Path in the Heart of Nothing. The sterile white infinity of the Sanctus Sanctorum became a crucible. Time seemed to stretch and thin. Each second an eternity as Naruto stood on the fulcrum of two worlds. The tether, the golden thread of connection that was his very soul's path back to Konoha, was fraying. Snapping strand by strand under the strain of Shalba's reality-warping ritual. He could feel it all. The scent of the forests after a storm. The taste of miso pork ramen. The weight of his Hokage cloak. The sound of his friends' laughter. It was a symphony of a life he had earned, a world he had saved, calling him back. "Naruto, the path is collapsing. You have to go now." Kurama's voice was a desperate, primal roar in his mind, the great beast's own survival instinct screaming at him to flee. He looked at the faces before him. Rias, her noble pride stripped away, leaving only a terrified girl who had placed her faith in him. Yasaka, the serene queen, her golden eyes wide with the horrifying knowledge of what was at stake, her trust in him absolute. Hiba, Akano, Kaneko, Asia, G. Asper, children who had been forced into a war they didn't start, looking to him as their unshakable anchor. He had come to this world seeking a purpose, a battle worthy of his strength. He had found it, but the price was higher than he had ever imagined. To be a hero here meant ceasing to be the hero of his own world. To save them meant abandoning everyone he had ever known. He closed his eyes, took one final, deep breath, and drank in the ghost of his home. Then he let it go. He opened his eyes, and the warmth of nostalgia was gone, replaced by the cold, hard clarity of a warrior on the eve of the final battle. The choice was made. The last, golden thread connecting his soul to the elemental nation snapped. He felt it as a physical blow, a piece of his very being torn away, leaving a hollow, aching void that would never be filled. For the first time since he was a lonely child on a swing set, Naruto Uzumaki was truly, utterly alone. He turned his back on the memory of home and faced his new reality. His new war. Yasaka, he commanded, his voice devoid of all emotion save for the chilling edge of command. Get us to the dragon's maw. Now. The order was the choice. The choice was the sentence. Yasaka stared at him, her heart aching with the magnitude of the sacrifice she had just witnessed. She saw the light in his eyes dim for a fraction of a second before being rekindled as a cold, burning star. She nodded, her own resolve hardening. She would not let his sacrifice be in vain. She plunged her hand into the air, tearing open a swirling portal of golden fox fire. It did not lead to the Grimoire Palace. It led to a place of immense, ancient death. Naruto, Rias whispered, her hand reaching for his arm, her eyes filled with tears. Your home, the connection. This is my battlefield now, he said. His voice flat, he looked at her in her peerage, and the coldness in his eyes softened for a moment. Don't let my choice be for nothing. Get ready to fight. He stepped through the portal without a backward glance. The others, their hearts heavy with a mixture of sorrow and a fierce, burning loyalty, followed him into the maw of the beast. The transition was jarring. They left the sterile, divine light of the sanctum and emerged into a cavern of oppressive, primordial darkness. They stood on a ledge overlooking a chasm so vast it seemed to be a wound in the underworld itself. And filling that chasm, coiling through the darkness, was the fossilized skeleton of a dragon so immense that its skull alone was the size of the Hokage monument. This was the dragon's maw. The air was dead, heavy with the dust of eons and an aura of profound despair. At the center of the colossal rib cage, where the beast's heart would have been, floated the source of that despair. The heart of Apophis. It was a sphere of absolute black, pulsing with a sickening, purple anti-light. It did not radiate power, it devoured it. The very concept of hope seemed to wither in its presence. Before it stood Shalba Beelzebub, his arms outstretched, basking in the nihilistic glory of his ultimate weapon. He was surrounded by a cadre of elite devils from the old Satan faction and grim-faced magicians from the Chaos Brigade. Too late, heroes. Shalba's voice boomed, echoing off the ancient bones. The heart is awake. The song of nothingness is about to begin. As he spoke, more portals opened on the ledge. A crimson one brought Searzex, Graphia, and a unit of elite Lucifer guards. An angelic one, shimmering with gold, brought a stern-faced woman with 12 white wings, Gabriel. The Seraph, and a contingent of Dominion-class angels. They had received Searzex's warning. The threat was too great to be ignored. The three factions stood arrayed against their common enemy, a sight not seen since the Great War. But all eyes were on the golden figure at the front. Naruto Dono, Searzex said, his voice grim. We are with you. Naruto didn't acknowledge him. His entire being was focused on the pulsing black heart. He could feel it, the conceptual poison it was preparing to unleash. Shalba laughed, a high, unhinged sound. All the gods on one stage, ready for their final curtain call. Perfect. Let the unmaking commence. He plunged his hands into the containment field, his body convulsing as the heart of Apophis accepted him as its master. The pulsing intensified. It was no longer a beat, but a steady, high-frequency hum that resonated not in the ears, but in the very laws of reality. Then came the wave. It wasn't light or sound. It was an expansion of pure negation. A silent, invisible ripple that washed out from the heart. The effect was instantaneous and horrific. One of Gabriel's angels screamed, a sound of pure terror, as her wings of light began to fade, becoming translucent. Then vanishing entirely. A devil in Sirzex's guard cried out as the demonic crest on his armor, a symbol of his lineage and power, dissolved into dust. It was an attack on identity. A conceptual virus that targeted the divine, the demonic, the very essence of what made them supernatural beings. Yasaka stumbled, a hand flying to her chest. She felt her connection to her Yukai nature, to the sacred energy of the earth, flicker and dim, as if a switch were being turned off. Rias's power of destruction sputtered around her hands, refusing to form. It's erasing us. Kiba gasped, his demonic sword flickering in and out of existence. The wave washed over Naruto. He felt it not as an attack on his power, but as an attack on his story. It sought to unravel the concept of the Sage of Six Paths. To erase the divinity granted to him, to reduce him to a mere mortal and then to nothing at all. But Naruto Uzumaki was more than the sum of his powers. He was a pillar of indomitable will. No, he said, the single word a command to reality itself. He flared his chakra. The full, unrestrained power of the Sage of Six Paths erupted from him. Not as a weapon, but as a shield. A golden aura, brighter than 1,000 suns, exploded outwards, meeting the wave of negation head-on. The dragon's maw became a warzone of concepts. A creeping, colorless gray of non-existence ground against a brilliant, defiant gold of pure life and will. Naruto's aura became a sanctuary, a bubble of is, in an ocean of is not. Inside the golden sphere, the fading powers of his allies stabilized. Outside, the world seemed to desaturate, the very stones of the cavern losing their conceptual weight. Impossible, Shalba screamed, his face contorted in disbelief. Nothing can resist the downfall. It is the final law. The final truth. You're wrong, Naruto's voice boomed, amplified by his own power. He took a step forward, the golden aura expanding with him. The final truth isn't that everything ends. It's that we have the will to fight for every second we exist. He was holding the line. He was a living, breathing anchor for reality itself. But the strain was unlike anything he had ever known. He wasn't blocking a physical attack. He was wrestling with the concept of oblivion. He could feel the unwriting wave pressing against his very soul, trying to find a crack, a moment of doubt. A flaw in his existence to exploit. Kurama roared within him, pouring every last drop of his own vast chakra into the defense. It's erasing you, Naruto. Your very being is the fuel for this shield. Naruto could feel it. His golden aura began to flicker. His physical form, solid a moment before, shimmered, becoming slightly transparent at the edges. He was literally pouring his own existence into holding back the tide of nothingness. He's fading, Rias cried out, her voice filled with terror. She watched in horror as the man who had sacrificed his entire world for them began to be unwritten from this one. Sirzex, Gabriel, Yasaka commanded, her voice ringing with authority. He is buying us time. While he holds that thing's attention, we will break their lines and destroy the magicians fueling the ritual. Quote, galvanized into action, the leaders of the three factions gave their orders. A unified force of devils, angels, and Yukai charged forward under the golden canopy of Naruto's protection, a desperate final assault on the apostles of oblivion. The battle for reality had begun, and at its heart, one man stood as a shield against the end of all things, his own existence, the price of every moment he held the line. The golden light of the sage flickered, and for a terrifying second, the bones of the great dragon were visible through his shimmering form. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Empty Throne and the New Dawn. The dragon's maw was a canvas of impossible conflict. A silent, creeping wave of absolute nothingness pressed inward, met by a defiant, shimmering dome of golden will. Inside this bubble of existence, the battle raged. It was not a battle of factions, it was a symphony of desperation. Sirzex Lucifer, his power of destruction no longer a blunt instrument but a series of precise, lancing strikes, dismantled the Chaos Brigade's magical formations. Gabriel, the Seraph, moved not as a warrior but as a living concept of hope, her holy light. A counter-frequency to the ambient despair, bolstering the hearts of her angels and shoring up the cracks in Naruto's golden shield. But the true revelation was on the front lines. Rias in her peerage moved with the deadly, fluid grace of a shinobi cell. Kiba was a phantom, his sword appearing from nowhere to sever a magician's connection to the ritual, only to vanish before a counterattack could be launched. Kaneko was an earthquake, her strikes not aimed at bodies but at the ground beneath them, shattering their stances and breaking their concentration. Akeno, a tempest of black lightning and chilling ice, controlled the battlefield, herding enemies into kill zones. At their center was Rias. She was no longer a king standing behind her pieces. She was the nerve center, the tactical core. A needle-thin beam of her destructive power would lance out, not to kill, but to erase a shield. A carefully controlled pulse would disrupt an incoming spell. She was fighting not with power, but with the philosophy Naruto had drilled into her. She was a weapon of precision. It doesn't matter, Shalba screamed, his sanity fraying as his forces were cut down. He was untouched, protected by a personal shield fed by the heart of Apophis. You are only delaying the inevitable. Your champion is fading, can't you see? He's becoming a ghost. Once he is unridden, so are you all. He was right. Inside the golden dome, everyone could see it. Naruto's form was becoming increasingly translucent, the solid lines of his body blurring at the edges. The golden chakra cloak was flickering violently, and the strain was visible on his face. His features etched in a mask of agonizing concentration. He was a burning candle, and his own existence was the wax. Naruto, it's too much. You're going to be erased completely. Kurama's roar was laced with a fear the ancient beast had not felt in 1,000 years. I know, Naruto sent back, his mental voice a strained whisper. But I can't overpower it. Oblivion isn't an enemy you can punch. He wasn't just defending, he was analyzing. The wave of negation wasn't a mindless force. It had a directive. It sought concepts, divinity, demonic energy, life force, and unmade them. It was a lock, and everything supernatural was the key it was designed to break. But what happens if you present a lock with a key it wasn't designed for? What if you don't fight the concept, but hijack it? A new strategy, born of desperate genius, bloomed in his mind. It was a terrible, insane gamble. Rias, Yasaka, Searzex. Naruto's voice boomed, startling his allies. I have a plan. I'm going to drop the shield. You will have exactly 5 seconds. In that time, you must hit Shalba in that heart with everything you have. Not to destroy it. You can't. You just need to create a crack in his control. A moment of chaos. Can you do it? The command was madness. Dropping the shield would mean exposing them all to the full force of the unmaking wave. But they saw the look in his shimmering, golden eyes. It was the same look he'd had before the raiding game, the same look he'd had when he faced Kryuzuri. It was the look of absolute certainty. We can, Rias said, her voice ringing with a trust that transcended logic. On my mark, Naruto yelled. 3, 2, 1, now. The golden dome of will did not just vanish. It imploded, every remaining mote of its conceptual power hurtling inward. Converging on Naruto himself. For a fraction of a second, he became an infinitely dense point of pure existence. The wave of negation, with its shield gone, rushed in. But in that instant, a torrent of power, the combined might of the strongest devil, angel, and yokai, slammed into Shalba's shield. The unified attack wasn't meant to break it, but to rattle the cage. The feedback was immense. Shalba's concentration, his connection to the heart, wavered for a nanosecond. It was the opening Naruto needed. He didn't try to block the incoming wave. He opened himself to it. He let the concept of oblivion wash over him, into him. Instead of being erased, he used his sage's ability to absorb and understand energy. He took the concept of nothing and made it his own. His body, already translucent, dissolved completely. He was gone. Naruto. Rias screamed, a cry of pure, soul-shattering anguish. But it was not the end. In the place where Naruto had been standing, a new object appeared. A perfect, spiraling sphere. It was not made of chakra. It was not gold. It was a vortex of pure, unadulterated will, a Rasengan woven from memories. Within its churning depths, One could see flashes of a swing set. An orange jumpsuit, a ramen bowl, the faces of his friends, the weight of a promise. It was the entirety of his story, his ninja way, condensed into a single, defiant concept. The Rasengan of will shot forward, not through the physical world, but on a conceptual plane. It passed through Shalba's shield. It passed through the obsidian shell of the heart. It strew the nascent consciousness of Apophis within. It was not an attack. It was an argument. In a realm of absolute non-existence, the concept of a lonely boy who refused to be alone, who built a world of bonds through sheer stubbornness, slammed into the concept of a dragon who believed that all things should return to the silent peace of the void. The dragon of downfall, the embodiment of the end, was confronted with an idea more powerful than any divinity, the unbreakable will to exist in the infinite value of connection. The heart of Apophis did not explode. It simply broke. It was a lock presented with a key that, instead of opening it, rewrote its very purpose. The heart, whose function was to unmake, was suddenly filled with an infinite, spiraling story of a will to be. The contradiction was absolute. Cracks of brilliant, golden light spider-webbed across the obsidian surface. Shalba Beelzebub, connected directly to the heart, screamed. His mind, which had embraced the concept of nothingness, was suddenly flooded with the infinite, chaotic, beautiful noise of a hero's life. It was more than he could bear. His eyes went blank, his body went limp, and he collapsed, his mind shattered by a philosophy he could not comprehend. The heart of Apophis dissolved into a shower of golden dust, the wave of negation vanishing as if it had never been. The oppressive despair lifted from the dragon's maw. The battle was over, but Naruto did not reappear. The Rasengan of will, its purpose served, faded away. He was gone. The price had been paid. Silence, heavy and heartbreaking, fell over the cavern. 1 month later, a new council had been formed in the underworld. In a grand chamber in Lilith, Sears Lucifer and the other Satans sat at a massive round table. With them were Gabriel of the Seraphs, Michael's representative, and Yasaka of the Yukai. Even a delegate from Asgard was present. The old rivalries were not forgotten, but they had been superseded by the shared memory of standing on the brink of oblivion. The cleanup of the Chaos Brigade remnants continues, Sears reported, his voice heavy. Shalba is imprisoned, though his mind is lost. The threat is over. And the cost? Gabriel asked softly, her gaze distant. No one needed to answer. A new, empty throne had been placed in the chamber, fashioned from the petrified wood of the god tree, a gift from Yasaka. It was a monument, a memorial to the god who was not their own, but who had saved them all. Rias Gramori stood before the council, not as a defendant or an heiress, but as a field commander giving her report. She was different. The childish arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet, unshakable confidence. She carried herself with the poise of a veteran leader. Her peerage stood behind her, their loyalty to her absolute, their sorrow a palpable presence. The human world is secure, she concluded. The treaties are holding. The world is at peace. A peace he bought for us. She looked at the empty throne, and for a moment, her composure cracked. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. We have not been able to find any trace of him. In the quietest place in all creation, the dimensional gap, a place of shifting colors and silent, endless possibility, Ophis floated, her expression unchanging. Before her, huddled on a floating piece of rock, was a figure. He looked solid, real, but there was a faintness to him. Like a photograph left too long in the sun. It was Naruto. He was not dead. He had not been erased. But the cost had been immense. In pouring his entire concept of self into the Rasengan of will, he had burned out the divine spark within him. The power of the Sage of Six Paths, the gift from Hagoromo, was gone. He was no longer a demigod who could touch the foundations of reality. He was just Naruto Uzumaki again. Hokage level, yes. Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, yes. But the transcendent power that had made him a conceptual anchor was spent. It is quiet here, Ophis said. You can rest. You are very quiet now, too. Naruto opened his eyes. They were still a brilliant, impossible blue, but the golden glow of the sage was gone. He looked at his hands. He felt his own chakra. The familiar, warm presence of Kurama, but the vast, sun-like power that had defined his time here was absent. He was diminished. He was mortal again. "Thank you, Ophis," he said, his voice raspy. "For finding me. You defeated the noise," she stated simply. "You made the silence safe. It was a good bargain." She paused, a thought flickering in her infinite mind. "They miss you. The loud red one. The golden fox." Naruto looked out into the shifting chaos of the gap. He had no home to return to. He had paid that price. But he had found something else. A new family. A new purpose. "Yeah," he said, a small, sad smile touching his lips. "I miss them, too." He slowly, painfully, got to his feet. He was still a warrior. Still a hero. And his work was not done. When Rias and Yasaka returned to the empty throne room that evening, to sit in silent vigil as they often did, they found a small, swirling portal of black and purple open before the throne. Ophis floated out, and behind her, a man in a familiar, tattered orange and black outfit took a hesitant step into the chamber. He looked thinner. He looked tired. The overwhelming, sun-like pressure of his presence was gone, replaced by the warm, familiar feel of simple, powerful chakra. But his eyes were the same, and the small, weary smile he gave them was real. He did not walk to the throne. The time for gods and kings was over. He walked towards them. "Sorry I'm late," Naruto Uzumaki said. There was a lot of paperwork. The empty throne remained empty, a symbol of a power too great to be wielded by any one being. But the world was not without its guardian. He had returned, not as a god to be worshipped, but as a hero to stand beside them. And for the first time since the day he was ripped from his world, in the tear-filled, joyous cries of his new family, Naruto felt like he was finally home. Chapter 10 End.